Chapter 923. Religion and belief were a kind of power born from idealism. They were the feedback of the collective consciousness to the world and the condensation of the wishes and wills of countless intelligent beings. It could be said that there was no energy in the world that was easier to establish a connection with believers through the dissemination of beliefs. However, it had a fatal flaw, which was that it was not pure. Even the most devout people would inadvertently integrate their subjective consciousness into their beliefs. Therefore, those who accepted this kind of power would inevitably be contaminated by all kinds of messy thoughts. When a certain kind of thought occupied more than half of the believers, the God they believed in would involuntarily change. As the object of worship and faith of half of the people in Neverwinter, Zhang Cheng had personally experienced this irresistible power. Please, stop the plague. We need the antidote, the real antidote. My children need food. These inner voices during the prayer process echoed in his mind like a demon's voice. They were mixed with energy. As long as one accepted the believer's beliefs, they would inevitably be contaminated by these messy thoughts. Based on this point alone, Zhang Cheng had sentenced the God, who relied on the dissemination of beliefs to gain power, to death. In his eyes, the evolution of a God should be constantly eliminating impurities to make oneself purer and stronger. But what about beliefs? Although it was easy to obtain energy, it was equivalent to putting shackles on oneself that could never be broken. Moreover, through the accumulation of these beliefs day after day, these beliefs from immortals would have an immeasurable and terrible influence on the God, even subtly changing the God's personality and way of doing things. If a life could not even preserve its own will, then it was no different from being dead. Just as Zhang Cheng was annoyed by these voices from the believers, in front of the gate of Neverwinter, a trial without a judge or a defender had begun. Bastards, you destroyed the antidote. Go to hell. Sinners, burn them. Traitors don't deserve to live. Accompanied by thousands of roars and shouts, the whole of Neverwinter felt the terrible power of these people from the bottom. After all, the people of the Faron continent were not like the modern people on Earth who have been bound by laws, morals, and values for a long time. They were a group of lunatics who could turn into a mob at any time. As a matter of fact, if one looked at the history of all the major cities on the Faron continent, it was not hard to find that almost every city had records of people rioting and overthrowing their rulers. Some of the more violent riots even ended a powerful ancient magic civilization like the Amaska Empire. Therefore, even the most brutal and vicious rulers did not dare to underestimate these people who were on the verge of an outbreak. As the culprits of destroying the antidote of the plague, Dessel and Vansvik were now hung under a tree and thrown by the angry people who threw stones, feces, urine, and other filthy things at them. In Neverwinter of the Fae of Neverwinter, the people of Neverwinter, Neverwinter, of Neverwinter, of Neverwinter, of Neverwinter, of Neverwinter, of Neverwinter. But now that something like this had happened, it was as if he had shot himself in the foot. Neverwinter of Neverwinter. Even his own safety was seriously threatened, not to mention winning back the people's hearts. In order to prevent the people from losing their minds and attacking the castle, he had to throw the two poor people out as scapegoats. As for whether Vansvik, who had been deceived, was innocent or not, and whether the whole process of the trial was not in line with the ideals of the God of justice, that was another matter. In the face of the cruelty and darkness of politics, even the priests and paladins of the Church of the God of Justice did not dare to interfere, let alone a mere lord. Although they were full of resentment and even had the impulse to kill all these rioters, they did not dare to take action. This was because it would cause the people of Neverwinter to be disgusted and hostile to the God of Justice. Worse still, they would rush into the temple and destroy the statues, altars, and holy objects enshrined there. In this way, under the watchful eyes of countless people, Dessel and Vansvik were beaten until they were on the verge of death. Then, they were burned alive on the bonfire. The painful screams they let out during the whole process were enough to give ordinary people nightmares for the rest of their lives. When the two of them completely turned into charred corpses, the angry people gradually dispersed. No one noticed that in a dark corner of the street, not far away, a woman clenched her fists tightly. Her nails pierced her palms, and red blood dripped down her palms. She was so desperate and angry that she forgot about the pain. Her eyes shot out sparks of hatred. That's right. This person was Vansvik's fiancé in name. Neverwinter's strongest paladin in the past, Araby's de Timorand. But now, she did not have the iconic grace of a paladin, nor did she have her usual gentle and noble temperament. Her whole body exuded strong negative emotions. Although she had not seen the dark blessing she received from switching to an evil god, the fall could not be reversed. It was only a matter of time. Vansvik's death made her see through everything, including the hypocrisy and weakness of the God of justice in the church, Lord Nasser's compromise to power and dirty governance, and the abominable true colors of the people she desperately wanted to protect. There was no justice. There was no justice. There was only pure venting. Even the victims who once needed protection had become the perpetrators in the current chaotic situation. No one deserved sympathy. No one needed to be saved. What the entire city of Neverwinter needed was a complete purification. There was only one way to achieve such purification, and that was to kill and die. Just as Araby's was about to wipe away her tears and bury this burning hatred in the bottom of her heart, she suddenly realized that a woman in black armor had appeared behind her without her noticing. She immediately drew her long sword out of reflex and questioned sternly, "Who are you?" Anger, pain, despair, hatred. You must be dying to do something now to make this city feel the same pain as you, don't you? The woman in black armor asked rather emotionally. So what if I am? This is my own business. It's none of your business. No, you're wrong. What you need now is power. Enough power to launch holy vengeance on those bastards. Come, follow me. I can let you obtain this power, and I'm also willing to give you a chance to take revenge. Don't you want to chop off Lord Nasser's head and enjoy his dying wail? Gastroenteritis acted up yesterday. I only came back from the hospital this afternoon. Sorry for not being able to update. Chapter 924. Hatred was a powerful force, so powerful that even the gods would not dare to ignore a mortal filled with hatred. However, this force could be easily manipulated and used. After all, people filled with hatred usually could not remain rational. As long as they could complete their revenge, they did not care what price they had to pay, even if it meant selling their souls. There was no doubt that Arebs was such a person who was blinded by hatred. She was also an extremely paranoid woman. Therefore, when she learned that she could obtain the power for revenge, she did not hesitate at all and immediately followed him to Mandarin Manor. Looking at Zhang Cheng, who was sitting on a chair with a faint smile, she finally could not help but sneer and say sarcastically, "So you are the mastermind behind all of this? You are the one who turned the pearl of the northern region into this hellish scene?" "No, my dear Lady Timorand, I am not the mastermind behind all of this. At most, I am just taking advantage of the situation. The ones who really want Neverwinter to fall into hell are a group of people you can't even imagine. The ancient Nazril era called them the creator race. They existed before humans created their own civilization," Zhang Cheng explained meaningfully. Perhaps others would think that the woman in front of him had completely fallen and could not turn back. However, he knew very well how fragile and weak her heart was. He did not know when the good side of human nature would suddenly take over, and she would begin to regret what she had done today. For such a person, you could use her, but you could never let her think that you were the mastermind behind all of this. Otherwise, when she changed her stance inside, she would immediately turn against you and become your enemy. Create a race? Erebs frowned subconsciously. Obviously, she had never heard of this term. However, this was not surprising. After all, although Sacred Samurai was a special profession that received higher education, most of the time they studied the scriptures, law, painting, sculpture, poetry, art appreciation, and other related knowledge. As for history, especially ancient history, there wasn't much to learn. Not to mention ancient races like the Creator race that had completely disappeared tens of thousands of years ago. That's right. According to the results of my investigation, these ancient species had just awakened from their deep slumber and wanted to regain their status, so they conspired to cause this plague that swept through Neverwinter. Of course, this has nothing to do with the anger and hatred in your heart. Anyway, no matter what, you have to kill Overlord Nather and destroy the Church of the God of Justice, right? Zhang Cheng directly pointed out the target of the other party's revenge. As the saying goes, when one loves deeply, one hates deeply. When a person felt that a person or organization he loved deeply had betrayed him, this kind of love would quickly turn into burning hatred like a volcanic eruption. Erebs replied with a gloomy expression, "It's not just the Church of the God of Justice and Lord Nas, sir. And those rioters, they had to pay the price for what they had done. The price of blood and death. Ha ha, don't worry, I can definitely satisfy you on this point." Zhang Cheng laughed and promised. "But before that, I hope you can do me a small favor, and that is to figure out the movements of Deepwater City's reinforcements. As long as you can do that, I can let you slaughter the tens of thousands of people in Neverwinter. I believe that the blood and cries of those civilians will be able to quell your anger." As an executioner who had destroyed 2 planets and caused hundreds of millions of lives to die without a burial ground, why would he care about the lives of Neverwinter citizens? Moreover, after the entire experiment was over, his consciousness would abandon this body. It did not matter how serious the consequences were. "Very good. As long as you can satisfy my request, I will do as you say." The dark Erebs had clearly locked onto the target of revenge long ago. Her eyes emitted a chilling light. "Come with me, Timorand. I will teach you how to completely embrace darkness and become a qualified dark warrior." After saying that, Eleanor, who was wearing black armor, nodded at Erebs and then turned to walk toward the guest room on the 2nd floor of the manor. Watching the 2 fallen female paladins gradually disappear into the distance, Valindra pursed her lips and asked with a smile, "My dear master, do you think Erebs can become an outstanding dark warrior like Eleanor?" Zhang Cheng gently shook his head and replied, "No, you're wrong. It's not about whether she can become one, but how quickly she will surpass it. Although she has a fragile and fickle soul, in terms of aptitude, Eleanor is no match for Erebs at all. By the way, how long will Luskin's army need to prepare before they can take action?" "At most 3 days." Valindra gave a final deadline without hesitation. "Great. Then let the war begin in 3 days. This time, I will bestow divine spells to the priests as a god and condense a divine title through slaughter and destruction." Zhang Cheng stroked his chin and revealed a sinister smile. He really wanted to see if those gods who had been scared by him back then would welcome him with open arms, or would they launch a siege in anger? Just thinking about it made him feel extremely excited. As for whether he would be beaten to death by the gods, he did not care. After all, this body was not his. At worst, he could just self-destruct and drag all his enemies down with him. Divine spells? You can bestow divine spells to the priests? Valindra's eyes widened in disbelief. According to the standards of the Pharaon continent, regardless of whether it was a demon lord or a devil duke, being able to bestow divine spells meant that they had the power of a true god. Why, do you find it strange? In terms of the efficiency of my energy conversion, those trashy gods can't compare to me. If they can convert 1 unit of divine power from a believer every day, then I can convert 10 units. No one in this world knows how to convert energy better than I do. As he spoke, Zhang Cheng took the initiative to extend his right hand. With a boom, a ball of scorching divine fire emerged from his palm. It burned so intensely and dazzlingly that it far exceeded the limits of the divine fire that most gods could condense. Seeing this, Valindra immediately knelt on one knee and said in an extremely fanatical tone, "Master, please bestow this fire upon me. I am willing to become your believer, your spokesperson, and chosen one in the material world." "Ha! You are indeed very smart. The divine fire is the purest essence of a god. Mortals who obtain it will not only have all sorts of powerful spell-like abilities, but will also have a near-infinite lifespan. Since you want it, I will give it to you." As soon as he finished speaking, the white divine fire instantly surged into Valindra's body, burning her skin and organs wildly. Chapter 925. 3 days passed in the blink of an eye. When Luskan's army came out in full force, the situation in the northern lands changed drastically. Countless towns and villages were nervously watching their route, fearing that they would become the target of attack. With the unparalleled quantity and quality of its army, Luskan was no longer the punching bag that was often beaten by the Alliance of Lords. Instead, it was a completely militarized trading empire. Other than the Silvermoon Alliance in the east and Deepwater City in the south, there was no other city that could match it. When a vanguard of the army arrived at the outskirts of Neverwinter Forest, the lords of Deepwater City could no longer sit still. They immediately held an emergency meeting overnight to discuss how to stop the ambition of annexing Neverwinter. Even an idiot could see that Neverwinter, which had been ravaged by the plague, no longer had the power to resist Luskan. Furthermore, their traditional allies, Lord Nather and the Church of the God of Justice, had been expelled by the angry people. They could only shamelessly hide in the castle and refuse to come out. "We have to send troops. Otherwise, Deepwater City will not only lose a barrier, but also countless trades. Luskan's fleet will be like a sharp dagger, pressing against the throats of the merchants." A lord wearing a mask stood up and shouted loudly, "Damn it, we don't have that many soldiers now, let alone the money to recruit an army that can fight Luskan head-on." Another lord held his forehead and gritted his teeth as he cursed. "Then borrow. Borrow from the merchants and mages. Use our future taxes as collateral. That's right. We have to fight this war, and we have to win. Otherwise, if we let Luskan continue to expand, the entire Sword Sea will soon be swallowed by them. At that time, an evil empire will be born. Are you idiots? Do you know the terrible consequences of mortgaging taxes? We can't mortgage taxes. Otherwise, we won't have the money to pay the soldiers and maintain the fragile order of this city." Just as the lords were arguing, the closed door suddenly opened with a bang. An officer in his 30s ran in, panting. He shouted at everyone present, Not good. Luskan's fleet is attacking our port." "WH what?" "Say that again." The first lord to speak stood up abruptly, his tone full of shock and anger. "Luskan's fleet is attacking the port. They have successfully destroyed and seized all the ships in the bay. Right now, it is estimated that they have already landed and begun to loot the surrounding warehouses and houses." The officer hurriedly said what he knew in the fastest and most concise language. "Bastard! How dare they? War! Lusekin was declaring war on Deepwater City. Declare war on the entire Lord Alliance. Gather the army immediately and chase these damned bandits into the sea. Everyone, we have no way out. Come, put down all your burdens and let Luskan experience the iron fist of justice. Gather all the suzerains in the northern lands. It's time to form a large coalition army to teach them a lesson." It had to be said that Deepwater City, with its superior geographical location, had a strong foundation. In less than 2 hours, more than 5,000 troops and several adventurers had been conscripted and began to clean up Luskan's navy, which was called an army but was actually a pirate. Looking at his subordinates retreating, Ian calmly put away his binoculars and said to his adjutant with a smile, "Blow the horn and let everyone retreat. We've achieved our goal." "Achieved our goal?" The adjutant blinked his eyes in confusion. "Yes, we only have 2 missions to the south. One is to destroy the ships and force them to move to Neverwinter by land. The other is to infuriate the lords of Deepwater City and make them gather more troops," Ian explained casually. "Sorry, Your Excellency, I don't quite understand the meaning of this." "You don't need to know too much. Just remember to follow orders. Master doesn't just want to defeat Deepwater City. His goal is much bigger than you think." When he said this, a silver flame flashed in Ian's eyes, and the corners of his mouth curled up slightly, as if he was expecting something. At the same time, the Mandine Manor in Neverwinter also welcomed a special guest. It was a tall human male wearing male armor. He had lost his right wrist, and one of his eyes was wrapped in bloody gauze. Ayaya, what a rare guest. I can't believe you still dare to come to the mortal world after the time of troubles, Zhang Cheng teased, pretending to be surprised. Because the visitor was not a mortal at all, but a saint of the god of justice, Tyre, a real god. You're not a mortal. You're a demigod? No, you're not a demigod either. You haven't obtained a clergy yet, but you already know how to use the power of faith. Who are you? The saint of the god of justice asked with a serious expression. Is it important who I am? A name is just a code. When my seed appears in the Pantheon Temple, the gods will know immediately. I'm very curious. Why are you willing to take such a huge risk to come to the material world? Is it because I expelled your church? Zhang Cheng was not nervous or afraid at all. Instead, he took the initiative to pour a glass of good wine for the saint. He could feel that the saint was not looking for trouble at all. He just wanted to see who had ruined his plan. That's right. The terrible plague that swept through Neverwinter was just a trivial matter in the eyes of the god of justice. What he really cared about was the race of creators hidden in the dark. To the human god system of the Pharaon continent, these reptile creatures that were older than most of the gods should not wake up from their deep sleep, let alone reappear in this world. In particular, those powerful primitive magic spells were a huge threat even to the gods. Therefore, the race of creators must die. The Saint of Tyre picked up the glass, took a sip of the slightly sour red liquid, and shook his head gently. No, you didn't use divine power in this game, so I won't violate the rules set by His Majesty Io, the god of gods. I'm here for another matter, something that even the gods are concerned about, and that is the revival of the race of creators. You should have felt the terrible power that those reptiles have. You want me to destroy them? Zhang Cheng asked with interest. Yes, as long as you promise to do this. I promise that no god in the Pantheon Temple will interfere. Okay, leave it to me. I'll let those cute little reptiles know how pathetic and overconfident their plan is. Chapter 926. After getting the answer he wanted, the saint of the god of justice, Tyre, quickly left as silently as he had come. He did not notice that in a dark corner, there was a pair of eyes filled with hatred and anger staring at him. Zhang Cheng sat on a soft chair and raised his cup to drink. Without turning his head, he asked, How is it? How does it feel to see the God you once believed in with your own eyes? Hypocrite, coward, pathetic. He doesn't deserve to be called the God of justice. I was really blind in the past to be deceived by his laughable ideals for so many years. Erebs slowly walked out from the corner with cynical sarcasm. The dark blessing on her body was so strong that she exuded a seductive aura that was completely opposite to her previous holiness. That's right. There's no such thing as justice in this world. Might is right. Eleanor followed closely behind. Ha ha. Well said. There's no such thing as fairness in this world. Justice is like toilet paper. You use it to wipe your ass when you need it and throw it away when you're done with it. Only the pathetic weaklings yearn for the arrival of justice. Now, I have a mission for the two of you to complete, especially you, Madame Timorand. Zhang Cheng laughed unscrupulously as he looked at the two fallen paladins. What mission? Ereb's face was cold. Her eyes were as cold as the weather in December, emitting a terrifying chill. Kill everyone in Neverwinter Castle, including Lord Nasir, because they're no longer useful. Here, these are some gadgets that can make divine spells ineffective. You just need to throw them to the ground, and most priests will lose their connection with God. After saying that, Zhang Cheng took out a dozen glass balls that emitted a faint silver light. A cruel and bloodthirsty smile appeared on his face. Looks like you've been planning this for a long time, haven't you? I'll enjoy using a sharp sword to cut open the stomachs of those hypocrites and pulling out their bloody intestines. I'll enjoy the screams and wails they let out before they die. This world needs a cleansing, and death is the only way to cleanse it. After picking up 7 or 8 glass balls, Erebs immediately strode out of the manor. As an avenger, she could not wait to put the strong impulse in her heart into action. In comparison, Eleanor, who had been a dark guardian for many years, was much calmer. She did not forget to bow before leaving, expressing her heartfelt gratitude. Not long ago, she had already had an intimate relationship with a Rebs who had drunk a special potion. Her empty soul finally had something to rely on, and she was no longer a walking corpse that kept people at arm's length. Watching the pair of blooming black lilies gradually disappear into the distance, Zhangqing couldn't help but smile slightly. He muttered to himself in a playful tone, "What a beautiful scene. Compared to the dazzling light, I still prefer the deep and silent darkness. Great master, your taste is still as unique as before. But would it be all right to send only the two of them? There are more than 100 paladins, priests, and elite warriors gathered in Neverwinter Castle." Valindra suddenly appeared out of thin air with a relaxed smile on his face. Zhang Cheng put down his empty cup and nodded nonchalantly. "Of course. Trust me, those self-proclaimed righteous fellows will not have the heart to kill a Rebs when they see her. They will even try to persuade her to turn over a new leaf. But a Rebs, who has completely embraced the darkness, will not care about such meaningless tricks. She will use all her strength to kill her former colleagues one by one. This is a predestined revenge and massacre, destined from the moment Lord Nazir handed Vanswick over to the mob to be executed. How is it? Is there any problem on your side? Rest assured, Luskan has already entered a state of war. Our army, wizards, and fleet are already ready to fight a long war with Deepwater City and the Alliance of Lords. We will use the blood, lives, and souls of our enemies to ignite the flames of the Pantheon for you." Valindra knelt down and affectionately kissed the back of his master's hand. Under the baptism of the divine fire, she had completed a complete transformation. She was no longer a mere mortal, but a god chosen like Elminster, Kelvin, and Illustrial. However, it was not the same as the silver fire bestowed by the goddess of magic. The divine fire she possessed did not have any attributes and could be completely absorbed and used by her own body. The owner of the silver fire would at most obtain the right to use it, but not ownership. They could not integrate the silver fire into their bodies, let alone obtain divinity from it and become a high and mighty god one day. To put it simply, Zhang Cheng had given Valindra a chance to become a god. Naturally, she would show extraordinary loyalty and fanaticism. "No, my loyal servant, it is not my wish to become one of the gods. Don't forget, this is just an experiment, a small and insignificant experiment. Once I obtain enough information, I will detonate this body. When the time comes, all of you who have obtained the divine fire will inherit a part of my legacy and become true demigods, just like the children of the god of murder, Baal." Zhang Cheng gently stroked Valindra's long hair, his eyes flickering with a chilling evil, generously bestowing his subordinates with an almost immortal life, great power, and the chance to become a god? What a joke! How could he possibly have such good intentions? In fact, everyone who had been bestowed with the divine fire was just a guinea pig for experiments. After a few years, he would return to see what the final results of these experiments were. "You wish for us to kill each other and let the victor inherit your legacy?" Valindra raised his head, a trace of ecstasy in his voice. The extremely selfish Valindra did not care about the lives of others. As long as she could become a god, she would not hesitate even if hundreds of thousands of people in Luskan had to die with her, let alone a few partners. "It doesn't matter what you do. I will leave you with pure divine fire, without any specific attributes. You can kill and steal from each other, or you can add in your own characteristics and accumulate power from nothing, finally ascending to the throne of a god. Remember, a true powerhouse does not care about the source of power, whether it is good or evil, order or chaos, as long as you can completely control it and not be controlled by it. All right, let's stop chatting. Next, let's see how Erebs completes her revenge and how she buries her once kind self." As soon as he finished speaking, Zhang Cheng activated the magic mirror hanging on the wall. In an instant, the scene of Neverwinter Castle covered in blood and corpses appeared before the two of them. Chapter 9:27. Erebes de Timirand. Are you crazy? Do you know what you're doing? An old cleric who looked to be in his 70s or 80s glared at Erebes as he clutched the wound on his abdomen. He could not believe that the paladin who was once seen as the embodiment of justice and virtue would turn into such a hateful, angry, and violent person. Crazy? No. I've only seen through your ridiculous, self-deceiving tricks. What justice? What order? It's all a lie. Otherwise, where was the so-called justice when the rioters killed Vanswick? Where was the so-called order? Arabies grabbed the cleric's collar and questioned him loudly. You're too extreme. What could we have done in that situation? Go against thousands of people and end up in a bloody conflict? Justice and order are not meant to create conflict, but to make more people lean towards kindness, not to push them to the opposite side. The old cleric gritted his teeth as he endured the excruciating pain. Compared to those young people who took dogma and slogans as the truth, the old cleric who had rich life experience knew very well that whether it was justice or order, there were many times when compromises had to be made. This was especially true for ignorant people who had been incited. Unless there was no other choice, there was no use of force to suppress them. Otherwise, there would be a strong resistance, and the subsequent events would bring about negative effects. However, Araby's focus was not on these, but on one word: fairness. That's right. It was the unfairness in the way she dealt with Vanswick that caused her to develop an uncontrollable anger and hatred. Staring into the old cleric's pale gray eyes, Araby's directly pierced the sharp, long sword through his heart, allowing the blood to gush out and dye her armor red. Then, she threw the warm corpse aside and muttered to herself, "Running away and being weak are no excuses. Since the God of justice cannot bring justice, then I'll take revenge myself. No matter what you do, I'll always be by your side." Eleanor cut off the young paladin's head with her sword and stepped forward. She raised her blood-stained left hand and gently stroked her lover. "Even if I'll fall into hell after I die?" Araby smiled and blinked. "Yes, even if I'll fall into hell after I die," Eleanor replied without hesitation. The two of them stared at each other for a full minute before they reluctantly separated and continued to slaughter the remaining members of Neverwinter Castle. Wow, it's so touching, isn't it? When Valindra, who was far away in the Mandine Manor, saw this scene, he immediately pursed his lips, and his tone was filled with playfulness and ridicule. Zhang Cheng shrugged noncommittally. "Don't be so mean. It's just two lonely souls snuggling up to each other for warmth." With this intimate relationship, they would go further and further down the road to darkness. You have to understand that humans are a special species that is afraid of loneliness. They need a little care and love. "Really? Why do I feel that you seem to enjoy the scene just now?" Valindra asked with a faint smile. "I did enjoy it. Don't you think it's very pleasing to watch a bright and holy soul fall into darkness? What's more, Araby's is the symbol of this city. Her fall will make the people of Neverwinter who still have hope for the future despair. Remember, my dear, power and tyranny can make the weak people submit, but it can't crush the hope and persistence in their hearts." Zhang Cheng meaningfully explained his understanding of conquest and rule. Indeed, the gathered people were an extremely powerful force, enough to make more than 99% of rulers feel fear and dread. However, the problem was that this force needed a sufficiently intelligent leader to truly unleash its power. Otherwise, it would be a sheet of loose sand. It was just like the Dark Middle Ages in Europe. The people of the lower class lived worse than dogs, but they did not dare to resist the cruel rule of the nobles. This was because almost all knowledge and military power were in the hands of the nobles, and the spiritual world was in the hands of the church. When the two of them worked together, even if there were occasional rebellions by peasants who could not survive, they would be quickly suppressed due to the lack of strategic vision. The people who lacked the leadership of intellectuals were simply not enough. This was also why there were so many rebellions in history, but in the end, it was always the nobles and intellectuals who established the new dynasty. The rebellions who were born in the lower class had even more ironic endings. They either joined these people or flushed away like toilet paper after being used. Valindra nodded thoughtfully. "I understand. As long as the heroes and the hearts of the kind-hearted people are destroyed, the flames of hope in their hearts will be extinguished. In this aspect, any physical punishment is far less effective than a spiritual attack. In the years when you were not around, Luskin often executed the spies of the Harpist League and the traitors who helped them in public. Over time, there is no longer a place for these people to survive. That's right. Habit is a very scary thing. No matter how cruel the rule is, as long as the people of the lower class get used to it, they will slowly accept it. Most importantly, don't give them hope. Without hope, they will be content with the status quo, because change means uncertainty. No one knows if things will change for the better or for the worse. In addition, if you want to turn Luskin into a real country, you have to unite some forces, whether it's the merchants or the slave owners who run the manors. In short, you have to let them feel that they can participate in politics. Only then will they form a sense of national consciousness. Zhang Cheng was obviously aware of Valindra's ambitions and openly pointed out Luskin's weakness. After all, without the people and without a sense of nationality, no matter how strong they were now, once a problem arose, it could lead to division or even disintegration and destruction. But with these two things, even if they were defeated one day, there was still the possibility of a comeback. After this war, I will do as you said and gather the merchants and slave owners to form a large council. But before that, we need to defeat Waterdeep City. Not long ago, Enchili sent a report that the lords of Waterdeep City have begun to summon allies to form an allied army. More than 60 nobles have responded to the call, and the number of troops has increased from 8,000 to 25,000. 25,000 people? That's great. The souls of these people after they die will definitely be able to condense a powerful divine domain for me. War, what a wonderful word. I really hope to see corpses strewn all over the place. Chapter 928. With the massacre of Neverwinter Stronghold, the last nail in Neverwinter was finally removed. Deepwater City was completely cut off from obtaining information, since they did not know what had happened in Neverwinter, nor did they know that the whole city had completely fallen under Zhang Cheng's control. They were ready to launch a fatal blow at the critical moment. In fact, not only did Deepwater City not know, even the nobles and merchants in Neverwinter did not know that they were already Luskin's allies. They were still highly vigilant of the troops stationed 10 kilometers away. Only the mutated officers with strange silver lights in their eyes knew what was going to happen to them. In order to better control the army, Valindra brought a total of 80 shapeshifters from Luskin. They could perfectly transform into the appearance of anyone and quietly replace them. At present, all the higher-ranking people in the Neverwinter army had been replaced by shapeshifters. As long as the order was given, the soldiers would immediately turn against their former allies and stab them in the back righteously. The poor lords of Deepwater City had not yet realized that Zhang Cheng had woven a huge trap in Neverwinter. Once they stepped into it, they would definitely die. When more and more reinforcements from the Northland Lords Alliance finally reached the unprecedented number of 50,000, they began to march toward the north in a grandiose manner. They planned to fight a decisive battle at the periphery of Neverwinter Forest and completely defeat Luskin's ambition to expand. As all the ships in the harbor had been destroyed, this coalition could only move on land. It was extremely difficult to transport all kinds of supplies. If one looked down from the air, they could clearly see a large number of ox carts, horse carriages, and mule carts moving slowly on the muddy dirt road. The speed was so slow that it made one's hair stand on end. Damn it, why did they stop in front again? A middle-aged man in shining silver armor cursed loudly. It was not that he had a bad temper, but a similar situation would occur every 1 or 2 hours along the way. It was a complete disaster for the marching army. Sorry, General Lamu. Another carriage overturned in front. The craftsmen are repairing it. It will be repaired in a few minutes. A scout hurriedly ran over to report. The man called General Lamu sighed helplessly. Hey, tell them to hurry up, or else. Before he could finish his sentence, 50 to 60 half-orcs riding on wolves suddenly rushed out of the forest beside him. Without saying a word, they directly rushed into the unprepared team and started slaughtering and destroying. Roar! Minions, minions, minions! The leader of the group let out a howl that was unique to Icewind Valley's barbarians. He swung his scimitar and chopped an unlucky fellow into two. The wolf he was riding was not to be outdone. It bit another human soldier to death, and then it opened its bloody mouth to scare the cowardly horses, cows, mules, and other domestic animals. In the blink of an eye, the team was in a mess. On top of that, many of the soldiers were exhausted from traveling for days on end. So, they let the wolf riders slaughter more than 200 people before they left. It was important to note that it wasn't just these few dozen wolf riders that launched the attack. Every 200 to 300 meters, there would be a team of wolf riders. In total, there were more than 1,000 of them. They didn't want to fight at all. After a successful attack, they immediately turned around and retreated, hiding in the dense forest on both sides. They didn't give the opponent a chance to fight back or chase after them. There was no doubt that this was a standard tactic of surprise attack. The purpose was to make the enemy tired and unable to have a good rest and march. If it was a head-on battle, these more than 1,000 wolf riders could only fight to a draw with the same number of human knights at most. But after dispersing, they were like ghosts hiding in the darkness. It was hard to tell when they would rush out and cause immeasurable damage. Just that charge just now, at least 2,000 soldiers were killed and hundreds of people were injured. Because of the frightened animals, there were even more traffic chaos and overturned cars. Seeing the heavy losses of his troops, General Lamu was so angry that his whole body trembled. He cursed, "Bastards. These Luskan bastards are so afraid that they don't dare to fight us head-on. They specialize in using such despicable means that can't see the light of day. Immediately gather all the knights here. If they dare to do it a second time, I'll let them see what the iron fist of justice is." "As you wish, General." The scout hurriedly bowed and rode on his horse to pass on the order. In less than 20 minutes, a group of knights composed entirely of elites gathered and stared vigilantly at the dense forest on both sides of the road. As General Lamu had expected, when the knights gathered, the wolf riders disappeared and did not appear again for a whole day. But the problem was that both the knights and the war horses needed to eat and rest. In the evening, when they took off their armor and sat on the ground to eat something, the orc wolf riders appeared again. Just like last time, they actively avoided the elites who seemed not to be easy to deal with, and specifically killed the ordinary citizens and farmers who were temporarily recruited. They even drove them to break the formation of the veterans. If they could break the formation, they would chase them and kill them. If they could not break the formation, they would retreat directly. At this moment, even an idiot could see that these wolf-riding orcs were not here to fight at all. Instead, they were here to attack the morale of the Allied forces and put the ordinary soldiers in a state of panic all day long. If the conspiracy succeeded, even if they successfully reached Neverwinter, they would not be able to defeat the exhausted Luskan. Magic! We need the help of magic now. Immediately, let the military mages monitor the movements of the forest on both sides of the road 24 hours a day. Once there are signs of the enemy approaching, immediately sound the alarm. In addition, divide the army into two halves. Half of the army is resting, and the other half is responsible for guarding. General Lamu immediately issued a new order after pondering for a moment. He knew that doing so would increase the fatigue of the soldiers and seriously slow down their marching speed. However, he didn't have a good solution to this problem at the moment. After all, the tactic of harassing the enemy was still very effective even in modern wars, let alone in the relatively primitive Faerun continent. Even if the sneak attack failed, it could greatly increase the psychological pressure of the enemy soldiers, especially when the enemy was lurking in the dark and could rush out to launch a fatal attack at any time. It was definitely not a good feeling. "Hey, these guys have been fooled. You can send a letter to Lord Gars and say that the Master's plan has succeeded. It won't be long before these weak guys become our prey." The orc hiding in the woods, secretly spying on the allied forces of Deepwater City, grinned and ordered his companions behind him. Chapter 929. Those who had never experienced the constant harassment of an ambush would never understand the feeling of being constantly on the edge, nor would they understand how terrifying it was to suffer both physically and mentally in such a state. Especially on the road from Deepwater City to Neverwinter, there was a long stretch of narrow area called the Sword Mountain and the Dead Swamp that was filled with dense negative energy, which provided a natural cover for the ambush. Furthermore, the Orc Wolf Riders were not from the Righteous Camp. In order to disrupt the mages who were monitoring the surroundings with magic, they even plundered dozens of villages nearby and gathered the villagers together to drive in the direction of the Allied army. If the enemy was vigilant and reacted in time, then they would choose to give up the attack and retreat to wait for the next opportunity. However, if the enemy did not react in time, then they would use these innocent farmers to break up the troops and launch a fierce attack on the Allied army, using fire glue to ignite the carriages filled with rations and supplies. In this way, the originally less than 5 days of marching took half a month. Furthermore, every soldier was exhausted and their morale had dropped to a freezing point. The treacherous and cunning Luskin only lost 400 Orc Wolf Riders and caused the enemy to suffer greatly before the war officially began. At the same time, the mages accompanying the army had to monitor the surroundings 24 hours a day, which resulted in them not being able to get enough sleep. Looking at these pitiful creatures who had set up camp 5 kilometers away from Neverwinter, Zhang Chung stood on the city wall and pursed his lips. He teased in a playful tone, "Unbelievable! Should I admire the courage of the Allied army of Deepwater City or laugh at their stupidity and ignorance in their current state? I'm afraid they won't even be able to withstand a round of fierce attacks and will collapse on their own. No, my master, you underestimate the resilience of these self-proclaimed righteous and kind people. It doesn't matter if their morale is low, as long as there are enough priests, mages, and bards, they can turn cowards into warriors in a few minutes. In addition, it is said that the mages of Deepwater City have also been mobilized. They're the real threat." Valindra gently stroked his beloved staff, his eyes filled with intense fear. As the two places with the highest concentration of high-level mages in the Northern Lands, Deepwater City and Silver Moon City had always been the greatest enemies of the Arcane Brotherhood. It was precisely because of their strong suppression that Luskin's expansion plan had failed time and time again. However, today, Arcane Light, which had been rebuilt from the remains of the Arcane Brotherhood, would have the opportunity to deal a heavy blow to the mages of Deepwater City and let the whole world know that Arcane Light was the strongest spellcasters organization in the Northern Lands. Don't worry, my dear, be patient. Before the show officially begins, we still have an appetizer, and that is to personally go to the enemy's military camp to establish an alliance. While he was speaking, Zhang Chung did not forget to turn a look at Erebus and the mutated monster officers behind her. In the Arcane Brotherhood, the mages of the Arcane Brotherhood, the Arcs of the Holy Church, of course, were, unless someone suddenly used magic or divine spells to detect alignments, no one would associate it with evil. However, Erebus obviously did not like the disgusting Holy Church at all. She frowned subconsciously and asked in an uncertain tone, "Are you sure you want me to lead the army to meet with the allied army of Deepwater City and then form an alliance?" Zhang Chung smiled and nodded. "Of course. Why not? Think about it. When those pitiful fellows try their best and think that they can win, but their closest allies suddenly betray them and launch a fatal blow from behind, that kind of psychological blow is absolutely incomparable to any direct suppression. I need to make Deepwater City collapse and let those soldiers feel fear from the bottom of their hearts. Only then will their souls be in incomparable pain and despair after death. Go, help me finish this matter, and then the citizens of Neverwinter will be yours. It doesn't matter if you want to massacre the city or make them pay for what they have done." "Understood. This is a deal, isn't it?" Erebus raised her chin slightly, her eyes still filled with anger and hatred. "Yes, this is a deal." Zhang Chung gave an affirmative answer without hesitation. "Deal. I will act according to your orders." Without another word, Erebus turned around and led the 2,500 Neverwinter soldiers controlled by the shapeshifters to open the city gates and march toward the Allied army camp in Deepwater City. Looking at the joyful expressions of the soldiers who were completely unaware, Valindra suddenly said, "Are you sure those soldiers will obey orders and attack their close allies from behind? It doesn't matter if they obey orders or not. As long as Erebus and the shapeshifters attack, the allied soldiers will believe it. At that time, whether the ordinary soldiers are willing or not, they will become targets. Even if they don't want to be killed, they will desperately attack the allies around them. On the battlefield, the emotions of the soldiers are often in a state of excessive excitement. Any bit of distrust will be infinitely magnified and eventually become a herd effect. Most importantly, don't you think it's interesting to form an alliance with your enemies?" As usual, Zhangqing's plan was dark and evil. It constantly touched the bottom line of human nature and tried to expose the hypocrisy of those kind people. There was no reason. There was no purpose. The reason why he did this was because he felt that the world should be like this, instead of shouting ridiculous slogans like equality, freedom, justice, and democracy, while desperately trying to set double standards in the dark. How could there be true equality in a race that would be divided into different grades based on their genes, intelligence, and physical attributes from birth? Even without the interference of nurture, people were born unequal. Although it sounded ironic, this was the cruel truth. Many people thought that social progress was actually humans using their own intelligence to resist the laws of nature and prove that they were the wisest of all creatures, a special existence that was superior to most animals. However, they did not notice that although humans appear to be resisting the laws of nature, they were actually tasting the evil consequences of resisting the laws of nature. For example, after the establishment of a perfect welfare system, the more educated people were, the more unwilling they were to have children. This was because they knew how much time, money, and energy it took to raise an outstanding child. Instead, it was those who had almost no education who desperately tried to have children, consuming a large amount of social resources for no reason, resulting in the terrible phenomenon of bad money driving out good money. Chapter 9:30. Although Erebs had joined the coalition forces of Deepwater City in the name of Neverwinter, which had boosted morale, General Lamu still insisted on staying in the same place for 5 days before sending a messenger to Luskin's camp to hand in a letter of challenge. The two sides agreed on a good day to set up a battle array about 10 kilometers away from Neverwinter Forest. They intended to use a battle to determine who would lead the northern region for the next few decades. As for why they did not start the battle near Neverwinter, it was mainly because the terrible plague in the city had not yet dissipated. Once the citizens rushed out, the plague was likely to spread among the army and even spread to the entire northern region after the war. Neither Deepwater City nor the nobles of the Lord Alliance wanted such a terrible disaster to happen. Therefore, they would rather give up the protection of the tall city walls of Neverwinter and cross the Neverwinter River to fight a fair field battle with the enemy. Looking at the orcs, half-orcs, barbarians, and various species of giants and goblins drinking the demon's blood in the distance, General Lamu took a deep breath and said to the Lord of Deepwater City beside him, "This will definitely be a fierce battle. Our enemies are stronger and more difficult to deal with than ever before. They're not a motley crew, but soldiers who have gone through strict training. Why are you afraid?" The Lord with a magic mask turned around and said with a faint sarcastic tone. In his eyes, monsters were monsters. No matter how many there were, they could not change the fact that they could only fight with the wind. Choking with sobs, Chi-Chi, 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 WWW. As the most powerful city in the northern region, Deepwater City had experienced so many crises that it was hard to count. Especially the city at the foot of the mountain built by the Mad Mage himself, some terrible monsters would run out from time to time. When they were unlucky, they would encounter organized and premeditated large-scale attacks, such as dark elves, beholder demons, and mind flayers. In the end, they were all driven back. The self-confidence built up over a long time made every lord of Deepwater City have an inexplicable confidence that they could handle all the crises. No, not afraid, but cautious. I suspect that these guys still have some tricks up their sleeves. Otherwise, They could have captured Neverwinter before we arrived and harassed us when we first arrived so that the soldiers could not have a good rest. But they didn't use any of these methods, which is a bit strange. Lamu touched his chin and expressed his concern. General, you think too much. I admit that Lu Seekin has been developing well these years, and his strength has been rapidly expanding. Don't forget that the terrible dragon who created all this with his own hands, Ingro Mazillion, had disappeared under the siege of the gods. So as long as we can win this battle, they will start killing each other for power and profit, just like all evil organizations. All right, I hope you're right. Just when General Ramus was about to say something, a low and melodious horn sounded in the distance. Woo, 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 in an instant. The goblins who had drunk the demon's blood at the very front finally formed a neat square formation and strode towards the allied army. Unlike those idiots who only knew how to scream and swarm forward, their eyes flashed with a crazy and bloodthirsty light. There was not the slightest bit of fear as they rushed forward against the rain of arrows that blotted out the sky. Level the spear. Level the spear. Get ready. Stab. First row, step back. The second batch, step forward. Stab. Accompanied by the officer's nervous shout, the two sides finally collided. These red-skinned goblins, who were only 34 meters tall, seemed to have gone crazy. Even if their abdomens and chests were pierced, they would desperately move forward along the spear, and then use the sharp daggers in their hands to slit the necks of the human soldiers and drink their blood. Although they only had simple leather armor and crude wooden shields on their bodies, they forcibly tore apart the tight formation of the Allied army, and even broke several large square formations of hundreds of soldiers. Cruel, bloodthirsty, crazy. The most important thing was that they were not afraid of death. Yes, General Ramus had never seen such terrifying goblins. He rubbed his eyes several times, thinking that he was hallucinating or that he had been too nervous recently and was hallucinating. Goblins were basically at the bottom of the food chain in the Pharaon continent. They were timid and cowardly, and even a 13 or 14-year-old child with a little training could easily kill 1 or 2 goblins. But now, these goblins with slightly strange skin color in front of him did not have the slightest intention of retreating even after more than 3,000 or 4,000 casualties. They kept rushing forward and were even more difficult to deal with than the strong orcs. After all, human soldiers were generally taller, and the spears in the front row were usually used to deal with cavalry or larger monsters. So, the small goblins could use their advantage to nimbly avoid the spears that were thrusting at them. Perhaps all the officers in the Allied army did not expect that the goblins, who were just like cannon fodder, could cause such a terrible impact to their formation. Seeing that the soldiers in the front row were showing signs of collapsing, General Ramus immediately ordered loudly, "Quick, send 10 teams of sword and shield infantry. We must stabilize the formation. We must not let those damn little monsters rush in." Understood. The messenger hurriedly rode his horse and sprinted at full speed. However, not long after he left, the large catapults at the back of the Luskan army began to show their power. Relying on the unimaginable strength of the giants, their huge arms hurled stone balls wrapped in fire glue into the air and landed in the middle of the formation of Deepwater City's Allied army. Every time, they would smash a dozen people to death. At the same time, the burning fire glue on the surface of the stone balls would ignite the weeds on the ground, creating a large area of high-temperature flames and thick black smoke. As a tribal chief of an unorthodox tribe, Gar had never received a proper military education. However, he had gained enough experience from the wars he had fought in time and time again. More importantly, while the enemy was rushing and resting, he did not do nothing. Instead, he asked his men to cut down a large number of trees and handed them to the craftsmen to make catapults, which did not require any technical skills but were powerful killing weapons. As for whether the goblins at the front line would be accidentally injured, he did not care. As long as he could win the final victory, wasn't it normal for some cannon fodder to die? Anyway, little monsters like the goblins could be found everywhere in Icewind Valley and the surrounding forests of Luskan. He just needed to catch a batch of them and force them to drink the evil demon's blood. After a little training, they would immediately become qualified low-level soldiers. It was because he had nothing to fear that Gar was not anxious at all. He watched as the goblins fought the enemy in close quarters and fell in droves. Chapter 9:31. A total of 10,000 goblins who drank the blood of demons. This was Gar's gift to the Deepwater City Coalition Army. When the last one was killed, the battlefield was densely packed with corpses. Among them were countless red-skinned goblins and a large number of human soldiers. The degree of devastation was far beyond the imagination of the nobles of the Alliance of Lords. They couldn't believe that the goblins, who had been regarded as pests and cannon fodder, were so ferocious that they killed more than 5,000 of their own people and injured countless more. But this was not the most terrible thing. The most terrible thing was that the goblins, who were supposed to be timid and cowardly, turned around and ran when they realized that the situation was bad, actually didn't retreat or run away even when the entire army was wiped out. This was not normal. Too abnormal. General Lamu ignored the priests who were busy treating the wounded and said to the Lord of Deepwater City, who was wearing a magic mask beside him with a solemn face, "Your Excellency, I think we'd better start retreating now. Luskin must have invented some kind of magic potion or spell to make these goblins so crazy. If even the goblins can cause such terrible casualties to us, then how terrible would the big goblins, bugbears, orcs, gnolls, ogres, giants, and other monsters be? No, we can't retreat. We can't fail. Don't forget that we're not the only ones participating in this war. There are also many nobles of the Alliance of Lords. If they feel that Deepwater City is unable to resist Luskin's expansion, what will happen?" The Lord gritted his teeth and asked in a low voice. When he said this, he didn't forget to turn around and glance at his allies who had a look of horror in their eyes. It should be known that the Alliance of Lords was just like its name. Its purpose was to unite the rulers of the various towns and villages in the surrounding areas of the Northern Lands. It was to prevent them from fighting each other to the death over small disputes and benefits, causing the people to suffer and affecting the prosperity of commerce and trade. Since it was a loose alliance, it meant that most of the small towns and villages were fence-sitters and relied on the Big Brother, Deepwater City, to support them. Once the Big Brother fell, or showed that he couldn't control the various monsters, then it wouldn't be shameful to surrender. This lord didn't dare to imagine how terrifying the political situation in the northern region would be if the Alliance of Lords collapsed and half of them joined Luskin. Damn it. Now is not the time to talk about politics. Your Highness, please take a look at those monsters whose skin color is obviously abnormal. They will rush over and kill every single one of us. Other than the mages, no one could escape. This was the final force of Deepwater City and the Lord Alliance. If we all die, then Luskin's appetite is likely to not only swallow Neverwinter, but also continue to directly attack Deepwater City. General Lamu retorted unceremoniously. No, I don't agree. What you're doing is equivalent to showing weakness to the enemy. We still have enough mages to deal a heavy blow to those monsters. I really saved everyone's lives. This battle could no longer be fought. Besides, we have mages. Do you think the enemy doesn't have mages? One stood from a political point of view, while the other stood from a military point of view. It was obvious that neither could convince the other. Just as they were arguing, a group of tall humanoid creatures wearing heavy armor appeared on the horizon. Their skin was a strange dark yellow. They were ugly, with sarcomas of different sizes growing on their skin. Their mouths were filled with sharp teeth, and saliva kept flowing out. It was simply hair-raising. Trolls. An army of thousands of trolls. A young officer could not help but exclaim loudly. That was right. These ugly and stupid creatures were the trolls that frightened many adventurers in the Faerun continent. After drinking the demon blood, they had made up for their weakness of being afraid of fire. Right now, there was only one thing that could really kill them, and that was strong acid. There was no hesitation. When the trolls had assembled, Gar waved his hand and took the initiative to launch the second round of attack. Bang, 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 bang. Under the slight tremor of the ground, More than 1,500 trolls began to charge toward the Deepwater City Coalition army. In their eyes, this was not a war at all, but a pleasant hunt and meal. The food was nothing else but living humans. Fire arrows. Prepare the fire arrows. Shoot. Shoot at will. Fire glue. All melee fighters smear fire glue on their weapons. Only fire and strong acid can kill the trolls. We're the mages. We need the help of magic power now. There are too many of those trolls. Along with the panicked shouts, the soldiers were suddenly in a mess. This was especially so for the militia who had not undergone long and strict training. They were almost scared to death by the trolls charging toward them. One had to know that they were usually reprimanded to deal with small monsters like goblins and kobolds. Even dealing with orcs, half-orcs, and gnomes was a little difficult. As for the trolls, they were on a completely different level. Sometimes, a small group of militia might not even be able to defeat a troll. If they were not careful, they might even be killed and become food for the troll for the next few days. In just a few seconds, the weapons in the hands of the soldiers in the front row were lit up with bright and hot flames. Fire glue was a special alchemy tool invented by the mages of the Faerun continent. Its surface was gelatinous. Once it came into contact with the air, it would immediately ignite into a raging flame that would last for a long time. It could be smeared on weapons to increase their lethality. It was the best choice to deal with creatures that were afraid of fire. However, the price of fire glue had never been cheap. Just the amount used by the Deepwater City Coalition army would cost at least tens of thousands of gold coins. Humans, food, eat, eat, eat. Facing the weapons smeared with fire glue, the trolls in the front row were not afraid at all. They directly jumped up and pounced on the young men in the front row who looked to be in their early 20s. They bit their necks and tore off their throats to chew. The crunching sound of the bones being chewed on by the trolls' teeth would make a normal person's hair stand on end. These crazy trolls did not care if they were injured or not. They would bite off a piece of their opponent's body and stuff it into their mouths every time they killed a human soldier. Some were even worse. They directly broke off an arm or a leg and used it as a weapon while biting from time to time. The bloody scene was a great blow to the morale of the Deepwater City Coalition army. Even the priests and bards' divine spells and spells to boost morale were not effective. Chapter 9:32. The food chain was the most direct manifestation of the dominant relationship between species. If a species was on the menu of another species, the former would often awaken the most primitive and instinctive memory in their genes when they encountered the latter. Then, they would quickly activate self-protection, making the brain think that running away was the best choice. There is no doubt that the trolls were such a monster that could be called a natural enemy to the humans of the Faerun continent. Especially for the ordinary people living in the countryside, trolls that could only be killed with fire and strong acid were simply nightmares. There were often such stories in the north. A few hungry trolls broke into a village at night, quietly killed all the villagers, and then ate them bit by bit. Therefore, except for the elites who often fought with powerful monsters, the rest had already begun to retreat when the trolls rushed in. The reason why they did not collapse was that the bards and priests kept boosting their morale with spells. The accompanying mages did not dare to continue to be bystanders. They chanted spells and released strong acid spells one after another, sending the dying trolls to hell. Feeling the fear and despair of the enemy camp, Zhang Cheng frowned subconsciously and muttered to himself in a voice that only he could hear, "Not enough. Not enough. I want to crush their last hope." "Master, the guys in Deepwater City can't hold on much longer. Do you think it's time to launch a general attack?" Garz asked carefully. He was not a fool. He knew that the goal of this war was not to win, but to wipe out the allied forces of Deepwater City and use the souls of those pitiful creatures to form a clergy. "No hurry. Let the white dragons attack first. Focus on the mages' positions and consume their spell slots." As Zhang Qing spoke, he raised his left hand and collected all the souls of the dead on the battlefield, regardless of whether they were friends or foes. Obviously, although the number of souls was enough, the quality was still far from enough. A clergy was not something that could be obtained easily. Other than snatching it from the hands of the existing gods, or waiting for his majesty Io, the god of gods, to grant it, the only way was to let the mortals have strong obsessions such as hatred, jealousy, greed, despair, pain, and so on. When these tens of thousands of obsessions gathered together, they would form an authority that was recognized by the entire world. When a god possessed authority, he would become the ruler of that domain. Any mortal who entered this domain would have to offer their utmost respect to the god in exchange for his blessings. In fact, although the mortals of the Pharaon continent could only have one guardian deity, they would pray to the deity who controlled their profession when they were engaged in other professions. The most obvious example was that all blacksmiths and craftsmen, regardless of whether they were followers of Gond, the god of craftsmanship and smithing, would choose to pray to this god when they were making something, hoping that their work would be better. For example, all the men and women who were pursuing their other halves, regardless of whether they were believers of the goddess of love, Shuna, or not, would beg the fire-haired lady to bestow her favor and help them win the favor of their sweetheart. In fact, there were many creatures in the world with divine power or divinity, but only those who had truly obtained the priesthood could be regarded as true gods and obtain their own seat in the ancient Pantheon temple. "As you wish." Gars bowed respectfully, then turned around and winked at his adjutant. The adjutant understood tacitly and quickly ran to the forest at the back. He untied the chains that bound the white dragons and let the dragon seeker feed them the spring water that was contaminated by the demon's blood. In an instant, these gigantic creatures that were covered in white scales from head to toe screamed in pain. Their eyes were quickly dyed red with blood. They struggled to rise into the air and swoop down in the direction of the allied army of Deepwater City at an extremely fast speed. They opened their mouths and spat out a large amount of deadly cold air. "Oh no, it's the white dragons." An officer was the first to discover the white dragons and shouted at the top of his voice. Unfortunately, the entire formation had already been destroyed by the crazy trolls, and there was no time to organize a counterattack. Wherever the white dragon sprayed, regardless of whether it was people or horses, without exception, all of them became frozen sculptures without exception. In the extremely cold north, the white dragons were the supreme overlords and the creatures at the top of the food chain. Except for the frost giants that were equally powerful, there was almost nothing that could threaten them. Looking at the white dragons raging above his head and killing several mages who did not have time to react, the Lord of Deepwater City finally panicked. He pulled General Lamu's hand and roared, "Damn it! Think of a way. We must not lose. Otherwise, Deepwater City and the Lord's alliance will be finished." "Shut up, idiot. I've had enough of your orders. Now, gather the mages immediately and mobilize 50 knights to protect them. Next, what we need is a large-scale magic ritual and strong crossbows. We must shoot down these dragons." General Lamu pushed the Lord of Deepwater City away and rushed to the side of a ballista with his guards. He quickly adjusted the angle and aimed at one of the dragons and smashed the hammer. Buzz! With a slightly harsh sound, a three-edged heavy arrow that was more than 1 meter long rose into the air and fiercely pierced the white dragon's fragile abdomen. The scales on its body only played a slight role in hindering the arrow, and then it fell from the sky with blood spurting out and fell into the crowd with a bang. However, the dragon that had been eroded by the demon's blood was quite tenacious. Before anyone rushed to finish it off, it waved its sharp claws and cut open the stomachs of more than 20 soldiers. The dragon's breath from its mouth even froze more than 40 people. "Go to hell, evil dragon," a knight with a silver spear shouted. With the explosive force of the warhorse's sprint, he directly stabbed the spear in his hand into the lower left side of the dragon's chest. Puff! This time, there was no accident, and the white dragon's heart was pierced on the spot. It swayed from side to side twice and finally fell to the ground with a bang. Just when the knight thought that he had killed a dragon and was about to cheer loudly to boost morale, the dragon's corpse began to burst into a dazzling green light for some reason. Before the surrounding people could react to what had happened, the next second boom, The deadly evil energy flames swallowed everything within a radius of more than 10 meters. Slaughter, death, destruction. The blood of the Lord of the Abyss turned these giant beasts, which were originally favored by magic energy, into deadly bombs. Once they were killed, they would immediately release all the energy in their bodies in one breath. Its power was far beyond most Ninth Circle spells. Chapter 9:33. There was a price to pay for slaying a dragon. This had always been common knowledge in the Faerun continent. Not to mention the possible retaliation after successfully slaying a dragon. The dragon itself was not a pushover. Moreover, most of the famous dragon slayers were actually very lucky. There were not many people who really crushed a dragon with their own strength. But today, General Lamu realized for the first time that the corpse of a dragon could also cause such a shocking number of casualties. Just 3 dead white dragons had killed 2 of his most elite troops, and even affected the accompanying mages. At least 20 mages died on the spot, and more than a dozen were seriously injured. This time, Deepwater City had only sent a total of 60 mages, including legendary mages like Kelvin and Lila. They were all busy with other more important matters and could not be contacted at all. But now, more than half of the enemy's mages had been killed or injured before the enemy's mages had even started to attack. It was a complete disaster. Yes, in Lamu's eyes, this war was a mistake from the beginning. Although the so-called Allied forces had the advantage in numbers, quantity did not mean quality in many cases. This was especially true for the militias from various lords in the northern region. They had severely hampered the combat effectiveness of the elites in Deepwater City. Some of the square formations had even collapsed and were being pursued by the half-orcs riding on the wolves. From the hundreds of battles in Icewind Valley, Garz had developed a keen sense of smell. He knew when to send the infantry for a head-on collision, and when to send the cavalry to crush the opponent and expand the victory. Looking at the chaotic battlefield in front of him, he finally could not help but ask, "Master, those guys are almost losing their will to fight. Are we not going to launch an all-out attack? Send a signal to Erebs. Let her sneak attack the mages of Deepwater City from behind. Then you can do whatever you want. Remember, we don't need captives or slaves in this war. I only want one thing, and that is pain, death, and desperate souls. No mercy, no forgiveness." Zhang Cheng's eyes flashed with a chilling light, because he could feel that as more and more human soldiers began to fall into fear, despair, madness, and other negative emotions, an unprecedented power was gradually condensing in his body. Different from the energy of faith and divine power, it was a kind of control, a kind of authority, and a special power given by the whole world. There was no doubt that this was a typical sign of a clergy being condensed. At the same time, Erebes, who had been doing nothing at the flank of the Deepwater City Coalition army, finally noticed that the gem on her hand began to glow. She immediately curled her lips slightly and said to the mutated monster officer next to her, "The time has come. Do it." Understood. Without saying a word, the mutated monster officer exchanged glances with his own kind. In an instant, a dozen or so people who had taken advantage of the chaos to sneak up on the mages pulled out their magic-breaking daggers and stabbed at one of the mages at lightning speed. Even though 3 or 4 advanced mages had triggered accident, some had tried to use teleportation magic to escape, but their teleportation magic had failed. Some had even wrapped themselves in a layer of stone skin, but it was unable to block the magic weapons with anti-magic properties. The poison smeared on the sharp blades did not give them a chance to cast spells or use magic items. Go, kill all the bastards in Deepwater City. This time, Luskin is our ally. Erebs did not hide her stance at all. Although the soldiers of Neverwinter were very shocked by this sudden turn of events, they were not even sure if it was true. But when a mutated monster officer led a crazy attack on the Deepwater City Coalition army, they had no choice but to follow closely behind and turn against their former ally. Obviously, their betrayal was fatal. It directly caused the entire Sideways city to fall into chaos and collapse. In addition, The mages led by Valindra continuously cast a large number of charm and control spells at the most concentrated areas of the crowd. At the same time, Gar personally led the core forces of orcs, gnomes, barbarians, bugbears, giants, and ogres to launch a general attack. Under such a fierce attack, even the brave and strong elite troops had reached their limits. In just 10 minutes, they were completely overwhelmed. Then, they were separated and surrounded. What was left was a cruel and bloodthirsty massacre. The other intelligent creatures were envious and jealous of the humans occupying the best land and resources in the world. Therefore, they did not hesitate to act ruthlessly. In less than half an hour, the 50,000-strong coalition launched and formed by Deepwater City had either been killed or injured. The soldiers and officers who were surrounded by layers of soldiers and officers huddled back to back in despair, trying to drag as many people down with them as possible before they were killed. "Come on, monsters, come and kill me." General Lamu was covered in blood. He waved his long sword and roared loudly. But unfortunately, for some reason, the surrounding monsters only surrounded him and did not attack. Their eyes were bloodthirsty, tyrannical, and murderous, which made him shudder. As for the Lord sent by the Deepwater City Council, her mask had long been torn off in the melee, revealing a mature and beautiful female face. She was dragged aside by a dozen strong male orcs and pressed to the ground to perform an 18-plus action film. Her screams were enough to make most people have nightmares at night. Just when Lamu silently prayed to the god he believed in and planned to rush forward and perish together with the orcs, the surrounding monsters suddenly separated and made a narrow passage. A pale and gloomy boy of about 13 years old walked out and greeted with a smile. "Good afternoon, Sir General. If you don't mind, can you accompany me for a few words?" "Who are you?" Lamu frowned and asked. "If you're asking for my name, I can tell you that it is meaningless, because the boy's body you see now is not the real me," Zhang Chung replied while taking out a bottle of fine wine and handing it to the other party. Lamu did not refuse. He took it and used the dagger he carried with him to dig open the cork. He raised his head and gulped down several mouthfuls of wine. If it were any other time, he would prepare a goblet, then pour half a glass of wine and taste it in the most elegant way to reflect on it and make a good or bad evaluation. But now he was about to die. He just wanted to drink wine one last time before he died and recall his life. After a full 2 or 3 minutes, the general reluctantly threw away the empty bottle, burped, and laughed bitterly. "Good wine. I didn't expect to be able to drink fine wine from the Cormier kingdom before I die. Tell me, what do you want to talk to a loser like me about?" "It's very simple. Talk to me about what you think about faith." Chapter 9:34. Faith. Ramus was obviously stunned. Zhang Chung nodded gently. "That's right. Faith. I noticed that you are one of the very few people who didn't have a mental breakdown because of facing death. So please tell me, what do you think of God and the world after death?" "A god is indeed a god. They rule the world of spirit and faith. Every mortal, from birth to death, is inseparable from the guidance of God. He will help you strengthen your faith when you are confused. I'm not a fanatic, and I rarely preach the doctrines of God. But it is undeniable that I have always respected him in the deepest part of my heart, and I am willing to go to his country after death." Ramus described his beliefs and values in very concise terms. Although he did not understand why Roland was interested in such things, he still gave an answer for the sake of the bottle of good wine. "So, you think that faith and God are an inseparable part of life. They're like eating, drinking, and breathing, a habit that is naturally formed. You believe in God not for money, power, but just to get a kind of spiritual comfort so that you won't be hung on the wall of the faithless and suffer after death." Zhang Chung summarized with great interest, touching his chin. "You can say that." Ramus shrugged his shoulders indifferently. He was originally a Pan-believer and would occasionally go to the temple to participate in important activities or donate some gold coins. That was all. "I understand now. Thank you very much. You made me understand how the gods instilled their will into mortals and made them think that this is what the world should be like. But now I'm going to give them a gift a very important gift. As soon as he finished speaking, Zhang Cheng's lips curled up slightly, and a dangerous smile appeared on his face. His body began to madly absorb the souls imprisoned in the container. In less than 10 seconds, he began to release a strong darkness, constantly devouring everything around him, whether it was light, air, water, or other substances. This power was so strong that even the sun was overshadowed, and its color became dimmer and dimmer. Finally, the whole world was shrouded in endless darkness. Whether it was Neverwinter, Deepwater City, Skyterra on the west coast, or the vast plains, deserts, and mountains to the east of the Starfall Sea, almost everyone could feel the darkness in their hearts rising continuously, as if it was resonating with some kind of powerful existence. In the next second, boom, accompanied by a loud noise, an extremely bright star appeared in the pitch-black sky. Then, they suddenly heard an extremely gloomy voice coming from the depths of their souls. "My name is Ingro Castimazillion, the god-slaying dragon. From today onwards, he would be in charge of the darkness priesthood. Mortals, fear, tremble. Face the true darkness in the depths of your heart. Embrace it, accept it, or you'll be swallowed by the darkness." When the last word left his mouth, Zhang Cheng's body turned into a stream of light that soared into the sky, disappearing into the vast universe. Yes, through this massacre, Sui Xiong condensed the dark priesthood that countless gods of the evil camp yearned for. He connected his power with the dark side of all the creatures in the world. He did not even need faith. As long as the dark side in the hearts of intelligent creatures prevailed, he would be able to obtain endless power from it. This was an extremely powerful priesthood. Even the most ancient goddess of the night, Shar, had not obtained it. In fact, Shar's priesthoods were only the Underdark, night, hatred, loss, forgetfulness, sleep, nightmares, illusion, lies, deception, unrevealed secrets, secret places, betrayal, insidious, seduction, theft, murder, winter, and so on. It was foreseeable that she would be hostile to those who obtained the dark priesthood for a long time. At the same time, in Farron's pantheon, a huge chair rose from the ground and stood in front of the throne of gods, emitting an extremely terrifying dark power. A great divine power. The god of justice, Tyre, who was the first to arrive after hearing the news, suddenly narrowed his eyes and subconsciously clenched his fists. He could not believe that the mortal he had inadvertently ignored had become the most terrifying enemy of justice. Let me see what happened. A dark god who was born with great divine power. Dear Tyre, what do you plan to do? The Prince of Lies, Sirik, was the second to arrive. As usual, he began to stir up trouble as soon as he appeared, spreading hatred and opposition. Did you hear the name he just said? Yingro Castimazillion, the evil dragon who killed countless gods during the time of troubles. Tom, who was loyal to the god of valor, was the third to arrive. He threw out the most sensitive information as soon as he opened his mouth. There was no need to ask to know that he had been resurrected by the god of gods. He was actively expanding his followers and spreading his influence far and wide. No, I want to see him. He's not a dragon. The god of justice frowned and retorted. Then why did he lie? Are you hiding something? Sarah questioned with a cold smile. I'm not like you, full of lies. Oomph. So what if I lie? Don't forget, I'm the famous Prince of Lies. Lying is my priesthood and also my instinct. While the three gods were quarreling, the originally empty Pantheon temple suddenly became lively. Gods of the good camp, the evil camp, and even the neutral camp were all present. They were all very curious as to what kind of person could condense such a shocking priesthood like darkness and become a great divine power as soon as he became a god. As the gods took their seats and waited patiently for the new god to appear, a ball of darkness suddenly enveloped the empty seat. Within a few seconds, Zhang Cheng appeared in his original human form on the seat out of thin air. Looking at the curious, hateful, and probing eyes, he only smiled and said, "It's a pleasure to meet all of you, and farewell. I hope you like the surprise I left behind." Before the gods in the Pantheon temple could react, his eye that had been replaced by a broken magic crystal began to flash with a dazzling white light. Damn it! Stop him! He's destroying himself. The third-generation goddess of magic, Midnight, suddenly stood up and shouted. But unfortunately, it was too late. When light and darkness clashed fiercely, Zhongcheng's body began to release a shocking amount of energy from inside out. Finally, the broken magic crystal exploded, and a chain reaction similar to nuclear fusion appeared from inside out. Boom! Endless darkness swallowed all the gods in the Pantheon Temple. Nearly a third of them died on the spot, and another third were seriously injured. Only a few great divine powers were slightly injured, and they all stared at the destroyed sacred place with their mouths agape. They couldn't understand at all what had happened to this new god. Why did he self-destruct? And in his own body. Chapter 9:35. Ha 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 ha. Adam, did you see the expressions on those gods' faces just now? They would never understand why I suddenly self-destructed. In front of the Tower of Time and Space, Zhang Cheng, who was in his Titan form, burst into unbridled laughter. Through this experiment, Sui Xiong had figured out the nature of the gods and the relationship between divine power and faith. He had also created a huge disaster. At least for the gods of Faerun, it was definitely a catastrophe. Yes, Master, I saw it. According to my calculations, the energy shock from your self-destruction is enough to destroy all gods below mid-level divine power. Moreover, because of your death, at least several million people in that world will fall into madness. Adam stood at the side and replied expressionlessly. As a god who controlled the dark side of human nature, his destructive power was naturally not much weaker than the goddess of magic who controlled the weave. Especially the moment Zhang Cheng became a god. He made a declaration to the whole world. Many people who have been devoured by the dark side of their hearts all chose to offer their faith and loyalty to this powerful new god. However, they never expected that the seemingly powerful new god would commit suicide after just a few minutes of joy. Unbelievable. Incomprehensible. Coupled with a crazy dark personality, it was not surprising that he would do something crazy. After all, when Sirik obtained all the god positions of the three death gods and became one of the most powerful gods in the entire Faerun continent, he had written a book called the Sirik Sutra. He had tried to use this evil artifact that could change the minds of the gods to trick all the gods into obeying him. But the funny thing was that he couldn't help but read it himself. As a result, he really believed the lie that he was the god, the only true god in the universe. Then, he brainwashed the priests of the mortal churches and made these unlucky people start a full-scale war with the churches of other gods. Of course, the result was unsurprisingly, they were beaten up by the gods together. If a mere prince of lies could cause such terrifying destruction, those dark believers who had collapsed their faith and had a mental breakdown would be even more terrifying. It was foreseeable that the Faerun continent would be in a state of extreme unrest for a long time. Unless the god of gods, Io, came out to clean up the mess, they would not be able to live a peaceful life. Zhang Cheng found it hilarious when he thought about how those gods would scheme against each other and even fight for the dark clergy that was born out of thin air. After a long while, he bluntly ordered, Adam, go and open a portal to Earth for me. Next, it's time to start the final plan. Final plan. Adam raised his head subconsciously, his eyes revealing a look of disbelief. That's right. I'm tired of this endless probing. Let's just lay our cards on the table and see who will be the final winner. Zhang Cheng sneered as he spoke of his plan. According to his deduction, the woman who claimed to be the creator was probably the same as him. She had stolen the star soul of the magic earth through some means. However, she did not manage to swallow the entire star soul directly, so she used the remaining parts to create the original gods. However, what she did not expect was that these primitive gods that were born from the remnant astral souls were filled with hatred and resentment toward her. They secretly developed their own powers and then turned against her at the critical moment, sealing her physical body in various parts of the world while her soul was exiled. This also meant that Zhang Cheng's enemies were not only the original gods that were in deep slumber, but also this mysterious woman who claimed to be the creator. Once both of them were dealt with, all the mysteries would be solved. Understood. However, it's not easy to open a portal that can accommodate your body. It requires a large energy source. Adam frowned subconsciously. It was not easy to build a portal that could accommodate a Titan's body out of thin air. At the very least, it would require an energy supply that was directly connected to the planet source like the Great Whirlpool. Don't worry, I've already chosen my target. Do you still remember the Lord of Flames? Icolit? He is the first flame that was born on the planet and now lives at the mouth of the Yellowstone volcano, which is connected to the Earth's core. The huge and rich energy there is enough to open a portal that can allow me to pass through. Here, take this with you. It will convert Icolit and the Yellowstone volcano into magical energy. With that, Zhang Cheng stretched out his right palm and handed a dark green sphere the size of a basketball to the life he created. As you wish. Adam never liked to talk nonsense. He picked up this powerful artifact, stepped through the portal, and instantly appeared in a small town near Wyoming in the United States. He did not disturb anyone and directly pried open a car with a skillful method and drove straight to the most dangerous place in the entire national park. Ever since Icolit triggered a partial eruption of the Yellowstone volcano cluster, the surrounding area had become a forbidden zone for humans. A large number of summoned fire elemental life forms spread rapidly along with the hot magma, forming a terrifying area that was dozens of square kilometers. Not to mention ordinary people, even the North American Supreme Council did not dare to send people to investigate. However, Adam was obviously not an ordinary person. When he arrived at the periphery of the lava pool, he showed a magic mark to a lava giant that rose from the ground. Instantly, all the fire elemental life forms that were ready to attack moved aside at the same time, making a path to the center of the huge volcanic crater. Looks like this mission is easier than I thought, Adam muttered to himself. He then left the car and crossed the lava pool as fast as he could, looking down at the green behemoth sleeping at the bottom of the crater. As a special life form that stored magical knowledge and skills from various worlds, he was naturally no stranger to dark energy. He could even clearly feel that the magma under the Yellowstone volcano cluster had been contaminated by dark energy, and it was spreading all the way to the depths of the Earth's core. There was no doubt that this energy alone was enough to open a magic portal that could allow a Titan to pass through. After all, Zhang Cheng was not a strength-type Titan like Sargeras, but an out-and-out magical Titan. His understanding of time, space, and energy was not something that Sargeras, whose mind was filled with killing thoughts, could compare to. Sorry, big guy. Master needs your sacrifice. Along with a deep voice, Adam threw the dark green sphere he was holding in his hand out with all his might. When this little thing fell into the magma with a splash, the ground began to tremble violently. Then Icolit, the Lord of Flames, woke up from his deep sleep and roared angrily. Who is it? Who dares to disturb my sleep? Who dares to absorb my power? Chapter 9:36. Greetings, great Lord of Flames. Please allow me to introduce myself. My name is Adam, a special life form created by my master. I'm sorry to inform you that for the final plan, my master has to sacrifice you in exchange for his powerful body to descend upon this world. Adam bowed politely. Lowly worm, who is your master? Icarlet raised her gigantic palm and slammed it on the edge of the crater, causing the green magma within a few kilometers to boil. Haven't you felt it yet? My master's power has taken root in your body, and he will be here soon. After saying this meaningful sentence, Adam leaped and left the crater that was about to turn into hell, using the power of magic to escape quickly. However, before he could fly far, he suddenly heard a loud noise behind him. Boom! The entire crater of the volcano shot up into the sky. Not only did it bring up a large amount of dark energy magma and volcanic ash, but it also lifted up thousands of tons of lava into the air. Countless bottomless cracks appeared on the ground. All the flame life forms, including Icarlet, were attracted by an indescribably powerful force, forming a huge black hole. In the center of the black hole, the basketball-sized divine artifact spun at high speed, compressing compressing. When a magma reservoir tens of kilometers underground was completely sucked dry, a huge ring-shaped energy field suddenly shot out, tearing the space apart, forming a terrifying crack that was more than 200 meters tall and 50 meters wide. Zhang Cheng, who had been waiting for a long time, squeezed in without hesitation. His huge body pushed the already fragile ground to its limit, letting out a bone-chilling, cracking sound. Damn it, I forgot that I'm a little overweight. After cursing under his breath, he quickly used the power of magic to compress his body and weight, and in the blink of an eye, he was no different from before, except that he was naked and without any clothes. Master, we better leave quickly. The geological situation here is quite unstable, and there could be a violent earthquake and large-scale collapse at any time. Seeing that the crisis had been averted, Adam quickly flew back to remind him. Don't worry about me. You go and activate the final plan. I need some time to adapt to the changes in my body. Zhang Cheng stepped on the collapsing ground and walked forward. Due to the high compression of energy and mass, he was like a baby who had just learned how to walk. For the time being, he was unable to control himself well. There was no other way. Ever since he became a Titan, his body had never shrunk, so he was obviously a little out of control now. It must be known that every Titan's body was condensed from a special liquid metal formed by the astral soul in the deepest part of the planet's core. Its astonishing hardness and quality were simply unimaginable to ordinary people. When such a high-strength and high-density metal was compressed hundreds or even thousands of times, the difficulty of controlling it was basically like an old man who had been paralyzed in bed for 60 or 70 years suddenly recovering. It would take at least 1 or 2 months to adapt and recover. Got it. I will follow your plan and release the potion to all the water plants in the world, allowing all ordinary people to awaken their magic talent within 3 years. Adam bowed and then disappeared into the horizon at an extremely fast speed. I have to get out of here as well. With such a big commotion, both the U.S. government and the North American Supreme Council will send people to investigate. It's best to avoid being exposed as much as possible right now. After a slight sigh, Zhang Cheng stretched out a finger and cast a teleportation spell with the lowest energy output. The next second, he disappeared into thin air and appeared in a square in Chicago after crossing more than 2,000 kilometers. The reason why he could immediately determine his location was because of the huge statue of Jordan in the square and the record of the Bull dynasty engraved on the slate below the statue. After all, even people who were not interested in sports could not have not heard of the legendary record created by the god of basketball, Jordan. However, the place where he appeared was not a downtown area, but a neighborhood that looked a little rundown. There was a lot of colorful graffiti on the walls, and he could even see single holes and bullets embedded in the walls. Well, I need a set of clothes now and some cash. Zhang Cheng sighed slightly and began to patrol the surrounding houses. Just as he moved slowly with an extremely uncoordinated pace, a young white girl carrying a backpack suddenly appeared around the corner. She was wearing torn jeans and a white t-shirt. The girl was stunned for a moment, and then she could not help but exclaim loudly, "Oh, Sage Astra's tea. Man, did you get robbed?" Although there have always been a lot of bad boys on these streets, they wouldn't go so far as to rob you of your underwear, right? Believe me, you don't want to know what happened to me. Zhang Cheng shrugged his shoulders, pretending to be helpless. They didn't do anything to you that can't be described in words, right? The girl raised her eyebrows curiously, and her eyes kept glancing at his bare buttocks. As a Titan, Zhang Cheng could easily sense the dirty thoughts in the other party's mind. He immediately shook his head without any hesitation. No, I don't. I wasn't robbed. Also, can I trouble you to give me a piece of clothing or cardboard that can cover the important parts? I'm not an exhibitionist. Sorry, I forgot. Here, if you don't mind, wrap yourself with this towel first. By the way, you have a good figure, quite stylish. As she spoke, the girl took out a slightly wet towel from her backpack. Beside the towel was a black bikini swimsuit. Needless to say, she must have just been to the beach and was planning to return to her residence. Thank you. Zhang Cheng thanked her politely and quickly wrapped the towel around his waist to avoid the most awkward situation. But before he could ask which neighborhood in Chicago this was, 5 shirtless black men with big waists walked out of building, and one of them was holding a bloody knife in his hand. Oh, no, no, no. The girl panicked when she saw this scene and turned around to run away. Hey, little bitch, stop right there, or I'll shoot. The tallest guy said nothing and directly took out a shabby black pistol. Don't shoot. I know the rules. I swear I didn't see anything. I don't know anything. The girl raised her hands high and spoke with a trembling voice. Those who had not lived in the poor neighborhoods of America would never understand how cheap life was, especially the black people who were known for their high crime rate. Even if it was for a pair of shoes, a watch, a diamond ring, or $12 in cash, they would not hesitate to shoot and kill. Chapter 9:37. You didn't see anything? Do you think we'll believe you? Be honest. Otherwise, I don't mind having to go with your body while it's still warm. The black man who took out his gun cursed and spat out all kinds of obscenities from his gorilla-like mouth. He walked closer and tried to make a move. His motive was obvious. He wanted to drag the girl to a corner and have a good time with her. In fact, wherever black people gathered, rape was as common as eating and drinking. Almost 90% of the girl's parents put a condom in their school bag after they turned 12. It was not for anything else but to protect themselves to the greatest extent when they were raped and to avoid contracting all kinds of terrible diseases. At the same time, the other black men also raised the bats in their hands, intending to hit Zhang Cheng's head hard. But before they could hit their bats, Zhang Cheng, who had been standing straight, suddenly made a very stiff movement. Instantly, bang, bang, the 2 unlucky fellows were sent flying more than 20 meters into the air. Their chests caved in, and then they fell back down from 20 meters. Their heads were like smashed watermelons, and a large amount of white brain fluid flowed out. Their deaths were so miserable that it made one's hair stand on end. And the reason for all this was the result of a gentle touch of a finger. Shock, fear, trembling. The remaining black men's pupils suddenly shrank, and they could not believe what they saw with their own eyes. Flew more than 20 meters with a gentle touch of a finger? Even a movie would not dare to shoot like this. With their pitiful brain capacity and IQ, they could not understand the amazing power of a titan compressed to the size of a human. Ayaya, I'm really sorry. I hate trash who casually use violence, so I accidentally killed them. I believe you won't blame me, right? Zhang Cheng slightly pursed his lips, revealing an incomparably dangerous smile. From the expression on his face, it was not difficult to see that he did not have the slightest intention of apologizing. Instead, he intended to kill the rest of them together. When the United States was first established, the founding fathers who continuously trafficked black slaves from Africa, as well as Abraham Lincoln, who signed the Emancipation Proclamation and provided a large number of cheap labor for the Northern capitalism, would never have thought that they had made such a huge mistake for short-term benefits. With the improvement of productivity and the establishment of a social welfare system, the descendants of black people who contributed countless flesh and souls to the rise of the United States began to wave a big stick called racial discrimination to fight for their own interests and even attacked other relatively weak immigrant groups. They were not productive. Not only were they lazy, but they were also extremely greedy. They took pride in criminal activities. They would rather risk their lives to steal, rob, sell drugs, and sell sex than to do something down to earth to change their living environment. Gradually, black people in the United States had turned from victims in the past to the current social cancer. What was even more terrifying was that the black elites would use their uneducated and stupid compatriots to launch various riots to fight for benefits. Once their goal was achieved, they would throw them all into the trash can. This was a tribe that had been severed, a community that had no dreams, no hope, and had rotted from the roots. Perhaps there were still some hot-blooded people among them who had not yet cooled down, and some who had not lost their sense of justice. But in the end, they still had to return to the words of Mr. Liu's son. If they did not explode in silence, they would die in silence. Or, under the leadership of a strong leader, black people in the United States of America would tear apart the United States of America and build a country that truly belonged to them on this rich land, using courage, blood, and death to awaken the numb souls. Unfortunately, so far, Zhang Cheng could not see this possibility, so he had a disgusted and contemptuous attitude toward the entire black community in the United States of America. However, this situation would not last long. With the launch of the final plan, some countries, races, and ethnic groups in the world would slowly awaken their magic talent in the next few years. At that time, human civilization, which originally focused on scientific research, would usher in a huge upheaval and change. At that time, everyone would be back to the same starting line again. It was not certain who would become the tyrant of the 21st century global village. F***CK. He killed Mons and Lozak. Shoot him. This guy is dangerous. Monster. Go to hell. Bang. 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 Accompanied by the crisp sound of a gunshot, more than a dozen 9mm bullets burst out of the barrel and hit Zhang Cheng's chest and abdomen. However, these bullets did not have any effect. To be precise, they did not even penetrate the skin and fell to the ground after losing their kinetic energy. The body of a titan was not something that could be penetrated by a mere 5 or 600 joules. Not to mention firearms. Even if the big Ivan developed by the former Soviet Union exploded on his head, it would not hurt a single hair on his body. Damn it. I said that I hate trash who use violence casually. Don't you black people understand English? Zhang Cheng dragged his extremely uncoordinated body and grabbed the black man who shot at him and threw him directly at the remaining 2 unlucky fellows. Boom! A white umbrella-shaped mist formed in an instant, followed by a huge impact force at a speed that was indiscernible to the naked eye. The 3 unlucky fellows were instantly shattered into a shapeless pool of blood and flesh under the interaction of the force. There was no doubt, under the immense strength of a titan that could not be described with words, even a light throw could make a non-streamlined body like a human exceed the speed of sound. After doing all this, Zhang Cheng said to the girl who had her back facing him and was trembling all over, "Miss, those scum no longer exist. Now, can you please tell me how to get to the nearest bank?" 5 kilometers to the west. The girl raised her arm and pointed to the right. Perhaps out of fear, she did not turn around at all, as if to express the truth that she did not see anything. It had to be said that her desire to survive was quite strong, and she understood that there were some things that she absolutely could not get involved in. "Thank you." Zhang Cheng thanked her politely and turned to continue walking along the street. He planned to withdraw some money before dark, then find a place to settle down and slowly adapt to his compressed body. After all, he could not maintain the astonishing height and body of a titan on Earth. Otherwise, whether it was the government of the ordinary people's world or the Supreme Council of the underground world, they would not sit idly by. Wonderful Book House. Chapter 938. There was no doubt that the UA was a country controlled by capital. All the rights, resources, and relationships were built with capital as the core. Whether it was the government and military that had not fought a war for only 16 years, or the capital group that started by supplying industrial raw materials to the United Kingdom, they all served the same thing. That was money, the root of all evil. In this place, as long as you were rich enough, no matter how outrageous your actions were, they could be forcefully interpreted as outstanding, maverick, performance art, and other positive comments. Even the shit that you pooped would be picked up by brainless fans who would take a bite of it and then shout, "Delicious." It had to be said that the French social psychologist Gustave Le Pen described in his book The Mob was exactly the same as the stupidity, ignorance, and ignorance of the lower class in the UA. Especially when Zhang Cheng walked into the bank with a towel wrapped around his waist, the security guards and staff immediately rushed over and tried to expel him as a homeless person. But after he revealed his identity, everyone at the scene immediately changed their attitude and apologized like a dog. Even the manager on duty rushed out and invited him into the VIP room. At the same time, he asked his subordinates to go next door and buy an expensive and decent designer suit. However, it was a pity that these actions of flattery and fawning did not receive any returns. After reapplying for a few credit cards and withdrawing 10,000 US dollars in cash, Zhang Cheng walked away in an uncoordinated pace and disappeared into the night. Because he didn't want to alert anyone, he didn't choose a five-star hotel as his place of residence. Instead, he came to a poor neighborhood and rented an apartment from a Latina woman in her 30s. Time flew by, and a week passed in the blink of an eye. During this period of time, Zhang Cheng basically stayed in the state of an otaku, carefully familiarizing himself with his new body, for fear that he would accidentally step on the ground and create a huge pit or accidentally push down a wall. By the end of the 7th day, although he had not completely mastered it, his walking posture was no longer stiff. At least he had no problems with daily communication. After confirming this, he finally didn't want to continue to be cooped up in the apartment. He opened the door and wanted to go out on the streets to experience the city of gangs, Chicago. But just as Zhang Cheng stepped over the threshold, before he had time to close the door, he suddenly saw a familiar figure coming down the stairs. It was not anyone else, but the young white girl he met a week ago. She obviously saw him too. Her face suddenly changed. She suppressed the fear in her heart and squeezed out an awkward smile. She took the initiative to say hello. Hello. I didn't expect you to live here. Yeah, we are really fated. I'm going to eat something. Do you want to come? It's my treat, Zhang Cheng said with a smile. Oh, okay. The girl obviously didn't dare to refuse and nodded lightly. She had seen the tragic scene afterwards. Although she didn't quite understand how a few vicious gangsters were killed, judging from the tragic death, this seemingly harmless Oriental man was definitely a ruthless character. Then let's go. I just found a good seafood restaurant on the internet. It's very close. Zhang Cheng made a pleased gesture and then walked out of the apartment. He drove a second-hand BMW he bought and arrived at the destination in a short while. After ordering a few signature dishes and red wine, he tasted the food and asked with a smile, "You seem to have a misunderstanding about me, right?" Misunderstanding? No, I don't think there is a misunderstanding between us. You know, I've been having nightmares for the past week. Whenever I close my eyes, I see bloody scenes. I have to rely on sleeping pills to ensure my sleep. The Latina swallowed the food in her mouth. Her eyes revealed a hint of frustration and helplessness. Relax. You should understand that those fellows deserve to die. They are the trash, criminals, and scum of society. All I did was send them to where they should go. Zhang Qing took a sip of red wine and explained. No, you are the one who doesn't understand the situation. Do you think those guys are normal gangsters? They are members of the Hungry Wolves gang. From what I know, the leader of the Hungry Wolves gang, Johnny, is crazily looking for the culprit. You better be careful. The Latina lowered her voice and expressed her worries. Oh, Johnny of the Hungry Wolves gang? Sounds scary. Zhang Cheng raised the corner of his mouth and smiled sarcastically. As a haven for criminals in America, Chicago has more than 200 gangs of all sizes. That's right. In a city with a population of only a few million, there are more than 200 gangs. They are densely distributed in the streets and alleys. Some of them have more than 1,000 members. They are large organizations with individual files in the FBI. But most of them are small groups formed by a few or a dozen young people who dare to fight. They also gave birth to the so-called gang culture. This included vulgar rappers, hip-hop pop music, and a huge network of drug dealers. All of these were part of it. The young people born here have been in contact with gangs since birth. Where they live, they may not see the police every day, but they definitely see gang members every day. The young people who grew up in this kind of environment, not to mention establishing a correct outlook on life and values, many of them started to kill people when they were only 14 or 15 years old. They used the most primitive and violent methods to earn money. The ambitious ones even used the underworld's heroes as their goal to strive for. But the fighting power of the gangs, everyone just laughed it off. They were basically no different from primates like gorillas and chimpanzees. If it weren't for the fact that the American government had recently begun to promote the universal values of freedom and democracy all over the world, which had deceived the white left in the country, they could have easily suppressed or even uprooted the white left in the country. Damn it, don't laugh. You may not be afraid, but I am. Once they find out that I was there, the consequences will be unimaginable. I will die, and I will die very miserably. The Latina couldn't help but curse in a low voice. Tell me where the nest of the Hungry Wolves gang is. I promise that after midnight today, all of them will disappear. You can't be thinking of, shoo, be quiet. Give me an address, and I will take care of all the problems. This way, we don't owe each other anything. Chapter 9:39. Johnny, a very common name in America. Even if you were to shout out his name on the street, 3 or 4 people would turn their heads at the same time. But Johnny the Hungry Wolf had his name on the Chicago Police Department, Drug Enforcement Agency, FBI, and other dangerous people's list. As a typical Chicago African, he lost his father when he was very young. To be exact, he didn't even know who his father was. He relied on his mother's prostitution business to raise his 3 siblings. The reason was very simple. The Chicago government introduced a series of welfare policies for single families in the 60s and 70s. Therefore, African men had a completely indifferent attitude towards impregnating women and leaving them behind. They didn't have any psychological burdens, nor would they be despised by their friends and family. Similarly, when a woman became a single mother, not only could she obtain a cheap apartment, she also received various food stamps and subsidies. She was even better off than if she was alone, and she was happy to have children. Over time, in places where Africans gathered in Chicago, more than 80% of the children grew up in a single-parent family environment. One could imagine how healthy their hearts were. When he was 14, Johnny shot and killed a patrolman for the gang boss. Because of this, he was recognized and became a member of the 200-plus gangs in the city. Relying on his fierce and unyielding style, he obtained a territory of his own in a short span of 10 years. He also managed a large number of illegal businesses in an orderly manner, especially when he helped other gangs deal with corpses. Every month, he could bring in $200,000 to $300,000 USD in net profit. It was simply irresistible. But today, Johnny was very irritated, because the few people who were in charge of dealing with the corpses had mysteriously died. They were killed by unknown people in their own territory. The newbies couldn't deal with the corpses as fast as the veterans, resulting in a few corpses piled up in the house, emitting a pungent smell of decay. Without a doubt, this was a provocation to him and the entire Hungry Wolf gang. There might be some hidden conspiracy behind this, so he had to kill one to warn the others. Roman, is there still no news? Johnny raised his head and asked his subordinate, who was cleaning his gun across from him on the sofa. Sorry, boss, there is no news at all. You also know that in order to prevent the cops from finding any clues that they shouldn't have, we destroyed all the surrounding surveillance cameras. The black man called Roman put a magazine into his gun and explained helplessly. *T. I hate this situation. Tell our brothers to be careful. I have a feeling that something big is going to happen. Johnny gritted his teeth and exhorted. There was no other way. One had to know that this was Chicago, a city made up of countless criminals. During the craziest times, there were an average of more than 20 shootings a day, and the number of people who were shot could reach nearly 100. It was not inferior to the battlefield in the Middle East. Among them, small gangs like the Hungry Wolves gang, which was in the middle and lower levels, would vanish overnight and become cold corpses. Johnny didn't want to be killed for no reason. He longed for power, and wealth. He longed to establish a powerful force like GD that could unify all the gangs in Chicago. Just as Roman was about to say something, gunshots rang out outside the house. It wasn't just pistols, but also submachine guns and automatic rifles. Bang, bang, bang. Tut, 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 tut. Da-da-da-da-da. F***CK. Go and see what's going on outside. Are these idiots crazy? Johnny suddenly stood up and roared. But before the lackeys beside him could rush out with their weapons to investigate, the gunshots disappeared for some reason. There was also the smell of smoke and blood in the air. Silence. Abnormally silent. It was as if everything that just happened was an illusion. Such a strange situation made these people who weren't very smart to begin with freeze in place. They didn't know what to do next. Should they open the door and investigate, or should they stay in the house? Unfortunately, their slow reaction didn't mean that others were slow as well. The next second, boom, the door that was reinforced with steel plates was kicked away by a huge force. Along with the 4 gunmen at the door, they slammed into the wall behind them and were smashed into meat paste on the spot. The violent and bloody scene made these gangsters who were used to seeing death tremble uncontrollably. Without saying anything, they aimed at the door and fired. Although the firepower looked ferocious on the surface, it was similar to the average accuracy of most of the black uncles. It was basically random shooting. Whether or not it hit was up to fate. When they ran out of bullets, the weapons in their hands started to make clicking sounds. Only then did they realize that they were out of bullets. They all took out bullets from the cabinet and desperately tried to stuff them into the magazine. But what was interesting was that, not sure if it was because of nervousness or fear, these guys weren't as familiar with loading bullets as they usually were. A few of them were so nervous that their hands were trembling. Oh, what a warm welcome party, isn't it? A young Asian walked in from outside and greeted Johnny with a smile on his face. There was no need to ask to know that he was none other than Zhang Chung, who had personally come to eliminate the source of the problem. "Who are you?" Johnny instinctively raised his gun and pointed it at the other person's head. Although the other person didn't even have a decent weapon on him, he didn't know why, but he felt that he might die tonight, and he would die a horrible death. "I'm the person you've been looking for. You know, you shouldn't have refused to give up after those pieces of trash died. I'm a person who hates trouble, but you took the initiative to find trouble with me, so I can only ask you to die. Goodbye. I hope we can meet again in hell." Just as he finished, Zhang Chung raised his hand and lightly snapped his fingers. Instantly, the heads of all the people in the room exploded at the same time. Blood and brain matter splattered everywhere. Looking at the walls, floor, and ceiling that looked like tofu pudding, he couldn't help but frown and complain. "Sigh, I still can't control my energy accurately like before, and the power of my magic is sometimes strong and sometimes weak. I have to think of a way quickly. At least I have to guarantee that I can use 1/30th of my power in my shrunken form." But complaining was just complaining. He didn't forget the purpose of this trip. He roughly patrolled the room and confirmed that there were no survivors. Only then did he steal the bundles of cash in the safe, as well as a few thick and shiny gold chains into a travel bag. He carried it and disappeared into the night. Chapter 940. For ordinary people living in Chicago, day and night were 2 completely different worlds. During the day, Chicago was one of the most important cities in the United States of America. It was also a world-renowned financial center. Even the big drug lords in Mexico and South America would send a portion of their drug profits here to launder. But once it was nighttime, it was a battlefield comparable to Afghanistan and Iraq. Hundreds of gangs of all sizes were constantly fighting. Every day, there would be dozens of deaths. Therefore, the residents of this city already understood a truth. That was to not go out at night unless absolutely necessary. Otherwise, they would be playing with their own lives. But there were always exceptions. In the driver's seat of a second-hand BMW at the corner of the street, a young girl was nervously observing her surroundings, especially in the depths of the alley where intense gunfire erupted not long ago. Even the slightest movement would scare her to the point of hiding under the seat. As for calling 911 for help, she didn't even need to think about it. Even if she called 911, there might not be a police car coming within half an hour. Based on the relationship between real estate prices in America and the speed of police dispatch, for places filled with poor people, illegal immigrants, and gang members, sometimes the police wouldn't come even if they called the police. Even if they did come, it would only be routine. They wouldn't risk their lives to fight the vicious and cunning gangs. Especially at night, even the police themselves were in danger. How would they have the energy to care about a call to the police? Perhaps in their eyes, anyone who dared to go out at night deserved to die. He just had to collect their corpses the next morning. "I'm crazy. Why would I come to this place at this time with a man I've only met twice?" The girl suppressed the fear and uneasiness in her heart as she muttered to herself, just as she took out her phone and wanted to try calling the other party. The car door was suddenly pulled open. Then, a heavy travel bag was thrown on the seat. Bang! The bag was so heavy that it didn't even bounce up. Damn it! You gave me a fright. How is it? Are they all settled? The girl jumped up reflexively and asked impatiently. Of course. The Hungry Wolves gang and Johnny don't exist anymore. If nothing goes wrong, they should be on the news. Zhang Cheng said as he closed the door and started the car. He slowly drove back along the bumpy road. If one looked closely, they would notice that his fingers were trembling slightly as he held the steering wheel. He was afraid that he would accidentally crush the steering wheel. However, the young lady sitting in the front passenger seat obviously did not care about this. She widened her eyes and asked, Really? You killed all of them by yourself? My God, don't tell me you're a special agent, assassin, or mercenary. No, of course not. No one in this world can afford to hire me. Oh, I almost forgot. Here, these are the spoils of war from the safe. Take them as my gift to you. No matter what, you gave me a towel back then so that I wouldn't walk around naked. With that, Zhang Cheng threw the travel bag stuffed with cash and gold chains to the other party. This is... The girl subconsciously pulled open the zipper and immediately saw bundles of green banknotes, as well as several blinding gold chains. Due to the influence of rappers and hip-hop culture, black people in Chicago would generally wear gold all over their bodies as a way to show off. Among them, gangs were the most affected. After all, as a symbol of wealth for thousands of years, the value of gold was deeply ingrained in people's hearts. Otherwise, there wouldn't be a phenomenon where the price of gold would immediately rise when the financial and securities market shook. How is it? Do you like it? Zhang Cheng slightly raised the corner of his mouth and glanced at the other party from the corner of his eyes. Of course. Who doesn't like money? But this money is dirty money, right? Won't this amount of cash cause any trouble? The girl was obviously not a fool. She immediately realized the trouble this money could cause. That depends on what you plan to do with it. Some people suddenly receive a large amount of money. The first thing they think about is how to enjoy, squander, and live a luxurious life that they used to be envious of. There are also a small number of people who, after receiving a large amount of wealth, carefully hide the money and then think of a way to open a shop. They slowly make fake accounts to launder the money bit by bit, and eventually it becomes legal property. The former pursued short-term craziness and excitement, so it was only a matter of time before they were targeted. The latter pursued a stable source of income. Generally speaking, as long as they weren't too unlucky, they would never be discovered. Tell me, which one would you choose? When he said this, Zhang Cheng's face revealed a playful expression. It was obvious that he wanted to stimulate the desires and dark side of a person's heart to see what interesting things would happen in the end. I don't understand. Why are you giving me so much money all of a sudden? Don't you want to keep some for yourself? The girl clenched her fists tightly and forced herself not to be blinded by the huge benefits in front of her, because she knew that there was no free lunch in the world. If she accepted this money today, it would be equivalent to her being held hostage by someone else. She might be controlled for the rest of her life. Zhang Cheng didn't take it to heart and replied with a smile. You don't need to understand. Don't worry, I'm not interested in your body, and I won't let you do anything. You can think of it as me doing a social experiment. I'm preparing to study what kind of interesting changes will happen when a girl at the bottom of society suddenly receives a large sum of money. Really? The girl's tone revealed a strong sense of uncertainty. Really? Believe me, this money can change your fate. Whether the end result is good or bad, at least you have a chance now. Yes, a chance. A chance that many people dream of. Although I don't know who you are, I still have to say thank you. By the way, my name is Yvette. My name is Zhang Cheng. Nice to meet you, Miss Yvette. After exchanging their names, the relationship between the two suddenly became closer. As a powerful titan, Zhang Cheng could already see through his eyes that the trajectory of fate surrounding Yvette had changed, and it wouldn't be long before there would be earth-shaking changes. He intended to use this young girl in front of him as a toy to pass the time while he was adapting to his body. Chapter 941. In the United States, if a poor man suddenly had money, what would be the first thing he would do? The answer was very simple, that is, move out of the place he lived. Although he didn't necessarily need to live in a luxurious villa, he should at least find a relatively safe neighborhood with a relatively fast police response time. As a young and beautiful white girl, Yvette's chances of being robbed, raped, and gang-raped in a neighborhood where blacks gather were far higher than most black women. So early the next morning, she found a house about 10 kilometers away from here on the internet. Similar to the places that most middle-class people could afford, the entire street was filled with two-story wooden houses that looked like cheap villas. The streets were very clean, and there were no graffiti that claimed to be street art, nor were there black people wandering around in twos and threes. Every 15 minutes or so, there was a patrol police car passing by, which greatly increased the sense of security of the residents here. Of course, the price was also quite expensive, including the intermediary fee and half a year's rent. It required a one-time payment of $6,500. All in all, according to the average income of ordinary people in Chicago, this was not a small amount of money. Even if they overdrew their credit card, only less than 20% of people could pay it all at once. However, Yvette obviously didn't need to worry about not being able to pay, but how to pay without arousing the suspicion of the real estate agent. After some simple thinking, she was smart enough to make a few phone calls in front of the real estate agent. She pretended to borrow money from her so-called friends in the past. Then, she drove out in a big circle. In the end, she returned to the real estate agent with envelopes filled with cash, ranging from a few hundred to $1,000 or $2,000. After the payment was successful, the two parties signed the lease contract, and the 6 months of use of the house was considered completed, and she could move in at any time. Phew, it's finally done. A new beginning. A new life. A new life. Finally, I don't have to worry about being shot when I go home, or being forced to live on the streets because I can't afford the rent. Yvette sat down on the sofa with a relaxed and happy smile on her face. Can't pay the rent? What do you do for a living? You can't even pay the rent of a broken apartment? Zhang Chung stood in front of the window, admiring the elegant and quiet scenery outside, and asked without turning his head. I work as a lifeguard at a swimming pool. My weekly salary is $600, and after deducting my daily expenses, I have to carry $20 in cash in my pocket every day in case I accidentally meet those damn black guys. In fact, I still owe the bank $15,000. At the mention of her salary and job, Yvette immediately showed a look of disgust. It had to be said that even though lifeguards were quite popular and had a high status in American society, their income had always been quite low, so much so that they could barely support themselves. Excluding a small number of rich kids who treated work as a game, most of the workers only treated it as a temporary occupation. Once there was a better opportunity, they would definitely choose to jump ship. Ha ha. Well, that sounded like a really sad story. Tell me, what do you plan to do next? Zhang Chung laughed and turned around. Yvette shrugged her shoulders and replied in a very relaxed tone. I don't know. Maybe it's like what you said, open a supermarket, gas station, or fast food restaurant, and slowly launder the money in your hands into legitimate income. But before that, I want to take a good rest and relax for a few days. Also, I plan to go shopping in the city center. I want to buy some household appliances, food, drinks, clothes, tissues, toothpaste, toothbrushes, and other daily necessities. Do you want to come with me? No, thank you. I have no interest in this kind of time-wasting shopping. Zhang Chung refused without thinking. Accompany a woman shopping? As long as his brain was not broken, he would not have such a crazy and stupid idea. Not to mention that he was now a titan who could destroy an entire planet. Even when he was a mortal without any power, he would try his best to avoid such a terrible disaster. If that's the case, then I'll go by myself. I'll borrow your car, and when I come back, I'll bring you a gift. Seeing the undisguised disgust towards the word shopping in his eyes, Yvette did not insist. She picked up the car keys on the table and drove away in the second-hand BMW. After she left, Zhang Chung took out his phone from his magic waist bag, which was 20 years ahead of the world's technology, and dialed one of the numbers. About a few seconds later, Adam's emotionless voice came through the phone. Master, do you have any orders? How's the plan going? Zhang narrowed his eyes and asked directly. It's going well. I've already put the artifacts you made in the 5 major lakes in North America. It won't be long before the water quality of these lakes changes. Drinking the water or eating the plants and animals watered with the water will have different degrees of mutation. After dealing with the remaining major rivers, my next stop will be South America, then Europe, Africa, the Middle East, Southeast Asia, and finally East Asia. It's estimated that it will take at least 8 months to a year. Adam's answer was as concise as ever. Zhang nodded with satisfaction. Not bad. So, in 3 months, the first batch of new humans in North America will be born. It's also time for me to provoke those old guys to start a revolution, completely in the Supreme Council of North America, and let the whole world usher in a new chapter. Master, I suggest you delay this time a little. It's better to start the revolution after you've completely conquered heaven, Adam hurriedly suggested. Why? Zhang frowned subconsciously. After becoming an invincible titan, conquering heaven was no longer as attractive as it used to be. As long as he was willing, he could even create a brand new heaven at any time, stronger than the current one. Because what you're doing is likely to trigger the awakening of those gods in advance. So, just in case, it's safer to conquer heaven first. At the very least, you have to make sure that those angels won't come out to cause trouble at the critical moment, Adam explained calmly. But you should know that with my current body, it's impossible for me to travel between hell and earth at will. Every time I teleport, I need an extremely large amount of energy, and at the same time, I have to tear apart that layer of strong magic protection. Have you forgotten that there's also a projection of consciousness? I can create a brand new body for you in hell. You just have to inject your consciousness into it. Most importantly, the power of hell is already overwhelming heaven. You don't have to do it yourself. That sounds reasonable. If you're not too busy, take some time to go to hell and settle this matter. As you wish, Master. Chapter 942. As Adam began to spread the ring of energy around the world, it didn't take long for tourists and locals to discover mutant animals and plants in the Great Lakes region, where the water quality changed first. However, like most supernatural forces, it would soon be suppressed by the underground world. But as the supreme ruling body in North America, the Supreme Council quickly sent a team to the site of the incident to investigate and try to figure out what happened. After all, ever since the shocking changes in Yellowstone volcano, the counselors had felt an inexplicable sense of nervousness. They had a feeling that something terrible was about to happen. So, contrary to their usual laziness, they began to actively investigate all the suspicious and dangerous incidents that they thought were suspicious. But all this had nothing to do with Zhang. To be exact, during this period of time, he completely disguised himself as an ordinary person, living in a middle-class house in Chicago with Yvette, enjoying a simple and ordinary life. Every morning, he would get up and run to exercise his physical coordination. Then, he would greet his neighbors and occasionally get together to have a barbecue party. Compared to the utilitarian and indifferent New Yorkers, the people in Chicago were relatively friendly, especially their enthusiasm for sports, which was much higher than most other American cities. Michael Jordan and the Bull dynasty he created were almost an inescapable topic. Almost every gathering, people would talk about the NBA basketball game. As a person who was completely uninterested in sports, Zhang stood up at this time and found a place where no one was around to silently think about his life. He thought about the clues that were too trivial to piece together, trying to figure out who sent him to this world and what the other party's purpose was. In the past, because he always had an urgent sense of crisis, he never had the opportunity and time to stop and seriously consider these things. But now, he was a titan that was basically impossible to kill. Suddenly, there was a trace of confusion, because he had no goal to surpass, and he couldn't see any limit that could be surpassed. With the power that Zhang currently possessed, as long as he didn't unlock all the seals and let the woman who claimed to be the creator return, he would be the most powerful individual life on the whole planet. Even if those sleeping gods woke up, this status quo could not be changed. Perhaps it was just like the saying that invincibility was a kind of loneliness, and loneliness would make people lose the motivation to continue moving forward. Although from a philosophical point of view, one could continue to surpass oneself and slowly accumulate strength to move toward a higher goal. If there was no worthy opponent, what was the point of surpassing oneself? Therefore, like many villains who sought death, he initiated an operation named the Final Plan. First of all, let the whole world recognize the existence of magic, then set off a revolution that would sweep across the world, break the underground world's monopoly on supernatural powers, and overthrow the joint rule of the Supreme Council. Secondly, he had to awaken the sleeping gods, kill some of them, and subdue some of them. Finally, and also the most important thing, was to open all the seals and release the only master creation that could harm him. Then, he would have a head-on clash with him to determine who was the true victor. He believed that after all this was over, those scattered clues would definitely be pieced together, and the mastermind behind the scenes would also appear. When he thought of the man who looked very similar to himself in the tomb of the demon king Satan, Zhang Cheng would have an incomparably strange feeling in the depths of his heart, as if the other party was observing his every move through some kind of device. Just as he stared at the bright moonlight in the night and was a little lost in thought, Yvette, who was a little drunk, suddenly appeared and greeted him with a smile. "Hey, so you were hiding here. Why, are you not interested in the topics that those middle-aged men are talking about?" "Yes. To be exact, I am not interested in the topics that most people are talking about. After all, it is more meaningful to be alone than to chat with a group of stupid people," Zhang Cheng admitted openly. Even though he had once longed to be able to live such an ordinary life, to have a high-paying job, to be able to afford a decent house and a decent car, to have barbecue and chat with friends after work every day, and to waste his life on all kinds of trivial household matters, he had never been able to live such an ordinary life. But now, when he was in this kind of life, there was an indescribable sense of alienation, as if this kind of life was all a beautiful illusion and bubble, and as long as he gently poked with his finger, everything would disappear in an instant. Perhaps it was ignorance that protected these ordinary people. If one day they really knew that they were living in a world full of supernatural forces, and that there were countless powerful life forms that could easily take away their cherished relatives, friends, and life, then more than 60% of the people would fall into hysterical madness and be unable to extricate themselves. "Wow, I didn't realize that you were actually so mean before. Don't forget, when you accepted their invitation, your face was full of smiles." Yvette pursed her lips and teased him with a smile that was not a smile. "No, that was just a kind of social etiquette. Even in the face of enemies, I will always keep a smile on my face. You can understand that this is a reflexive habit. In addition, I suggest that it is best not to continue to increase the alcohol content in your blood. Otherwise, once you are drunk, who knows what secrets you will reveal. As a smart and beautiful girl, you don't want to destroy the new life that you have painstakingly built, right?" After that, Zhang Cheng's eyes flashed with a dazzling violet light. The next second, Yvette completely uncontrollably shivered, and her whole body was suddenly soaked in sweat. Her whole brain finally sobered up, and she quickly shook her head. "Of course not. Damn it, I drank a bit too much. Thank you for reminding me." "You're welcome. After all, you are my observation and experimental subject. If you're accidentally locked up in prison, then it will not be fun. Remember, you can be greedy, you can be indifferent, you can be cruel, but you must not be stupid and lose your self-control. Don't be deceived by the so-called cheap friendship. You are not like them. Understood? And they are people from two completely different worlds. I only have one goal, and that is to launder all the money as soon as possible, and then find a way to climb up and enter the enviable upper class." "That's right. You are a black rose that grew up in the dark. You should be exuding the fragrance from hell, not playing these children's games. And as a woman, you have a biggest advantage that you have not used, and that is yourself. Do you still remember that fat Mr. Claudian? He is a consultant for a financial investment company. If you can get him tonight, then he can help you launder millions of dollars." Chapter 943. At the border between hell and heaven, a black river called the River Styx flowed slowly, completely separating the two worlds. As the scariest river in the world, the river Styx had many incredible powers. For example, the area within 2 kilometers of the river was an absolute anti-magic area. Anything related to magic energy would be nullified by some mysterious power without exception. Other than that, neither angels nor demons could fly across the river Styx. Otherwise, they would be pulled into the river by a powerful force. It could be said that if someone wanted to go from heaven to hell, or vice versa, they could only walk on a stone arch bridge that was 50 meters wide and more than 600 meters long. No one knew when the bridge was built, and no one knew who built it. Anyway, in all the records of the angels and demons, when the two worlds collided, the bridge had always been standing there. No matter how tragic the war and the baptism of time, it would not collapse. On the left side of the bridge was heaven, which was emitting strong positive energy and dazzling light. Not far away, there was a huge military fortress. Even from a few kilometers away, one could see countless angels flapping their pure white wings, patrolling nervously. On the right side of the bridge was hell, which was filled with a dark and evil aura. Similarly, there was a gloomy and terrifying castle. On the spikes above the castle, there were many angelic corpses that had been treated with a layer of embalming. It looked ferocious and terrifying. Other than that, a large number of resurrected technicians and engineers of the Burning Legion were working overtime to build new war machines. Just the Fell Reaver and Super Hellfire that were more than 10 meters tall had already reached 3 digits, and the number was still increasing. Especially the pools that were built not long ago to store dark energy. Looking from afar, they looked green and glossy, making people feel inexplicably nervous. At this moment, even if heaven was a fool, it would know that hell was ready to launch a full-scale attack. Therefore, both sides simultaneously gathered a large number of troops at the border, planning to fight a tragic all-out war. Feeling the tense atmosphere in the air, the succubus queen Ren licked her lips and sighed. War! What a wonderful word. Those pitiful little angels are filled with fear. How long do we have to wait before we can attack and harvest their despairing souls? Don't worry. We still need to wait for Master's orders. Polak gently stroked his newly reforged great sword and replied. With the rapid spread of dark energy and shadow in this world, his warning had swelled to a level comparable to that of Karzak, the Lord of Doom. His eyes shot out a terrifying green light. Damn it, I hate waiting. Why don't we launch a probing attack first? Ren's eyes darted around. She was obviously plotting something. If you want to die, no one will stop you. But remember, please don't take us with you. Don't forget that your master doesn't like it when his subordinates act on their own. I suspect that if you really do that, he will skin you alive without hesitation. Voleni sneered. No one knew better than him what kind of person Zhang Cheng was. He was a lunatic who truly embraced darkness and valued his own interests more than anything else. As long as he had enough reason, destroying the world was a piece of cake. Lowly human, don't think that you can always please Master with your little cleverness. When you fall out of favor one day, I'll be very happy to dig out your heart. Ren narrowed her eyes and threatened fiercely. There was no doubt that as a succubus who liked to play tricks, she hated Voleni, who had the ability to accurately predict the future. The reason was very simple. With the accurate prediction of the future, all plots and tricks could not be hidden. Ha! Fall out of favor? Do you think I'm a clown who is responsible for making fun of the medieval king? No, my dear, my role is far more important than you think. Also, don't use the term lowly humans all the time. Otherwise, your master won't be happy to hear it. Warren chuckled as he retorted. As it was not the first time the two had been at each other's throats, he was used to this mode of getting along. He was not willing to suffer any losses. Just as Ren was about to mock him, a ray of light flashed through the temporary teleportation gate. Then, Adam in a black suit walked out. He first glanced at the few higher-ups present, then said unhurriedly, Master needs a body now, a body that is strong enough to accommodate his consciousness. Who are you? Akima, who had just returned from the human world, asked. I am Adam, a special life form created by Master. Adam answered without hesitation. Why does he need a body? Can't Master directly go through the portal that has already been built? Ren asked with a curious expression. Adam shook his head regretfully. No, the energy source of the teleportation gate is too small. It is not enough to accommodate a life form of the size of Titan. Titan? You mean Master used some method to turn himself into a Titan? Unbelievable. All the Abyssal Lords, Dreadlords, and Erita demons of the Burning Legion in the hall could not help but exclaim loudly, because no one knew better than them what a Titan meant. That was the most powerful life form they knew. It was a colossus that could easily crush the ancient gods sent out by the Void Forces. How did Master become a Titan? Ren's eyes flashed with unusual excitement. He swallowed the astral soul of Azeroth and repelled the siege of the Pantheon. Adam calmly told the truth. As one of the executors of the whole plan, no one knew better than him how terrifying Zhang Cheng was when he unleashed his full power. There was no decent energy source to maintain a teleportation gate that could allow him to travel freely between heaven and hell. Ren nodded thoughtfully. So that's how it is. I understand now. Balam, go and gather as much dark energy as possible. We need to build a strong body for Master. Is my pleasure, my queen. The Dreadlord known as Balam bowed deeply. With the too taboo knowledge of dark energy and the distortion of the void, he was best at creating powerful artifacts. A mere metal body was nothing to him. Soon, under the operation of the huge war machine that was Hell, countless rare magical metals were transported to the front lines. After many rounds of smelting, casting, and enchantment, they were finally made into the shape of a head, body, arms, and legs. Chapter 944. What are those demons doing? I don't know. It looks like they're putting together a metal giant. On the other side of the river Styx, the two angels in charge of scouting widened their eyes as they stared at the gigantic metal humanoid statue that was hundreds of meters tall. With their attainments in mysticism, they could not understand what the dense runes on the surface of the body meant. They also did not understand the incredible changes that would occur when a Titan's consciousness was injected into it. However, out of caution, the two angels quickly returned to the fortress and reported to the commander of the entire legion stationed at the border. As soon as they left, in the demon camp on the other side of the river Styx, a dazzling violet light suddenly shone from the sky, illuminating the originally dark and cloudy sky. The next second, all the pool water used to store evil energy began to boil, forming a large cloud of green steam that constantly revolved around the metal giant's body. Wherever the green steam passed, the runes on the surface of the body would light up one by one until the giant's eyes slowly opened, flashing with an indescribable deep light. Supreme Great Master, your humble servant awaits your arrival. The succubus Queen Ren was the first to kneel, her voice full of excitement and devotion. Yes, she felt an astonishing aura that was no different from that of the former leader of the Burning Legion, the Dark Titan Sargeras, or perhaps even stronger. Powerful, evil, darkness. No matter how powerful a demon was, they had to lower their noble heads and offer absolute loyalty and obedience in front of this unparalleled power. Otherwise, they would face a calamity. Who designed this body? It feels good. Zhang Cheng, who had descended through the projection of his consciousness, moved a little, and a look of surprise appeared on his face. It's me, Master. Balam hurriedly took 2 steps forward and prostrated himself on the ground with an extremely sincere attitude. Well done. Here, take it. This is the reward you deserve. Seeing that it was the Nazresm Dreadlord, Zhang Cheng's eyes immediately lit up. He threw a fragment condensed from the remaining energy of the Azeroth star core on the ground. Even though most of the time, these advanced demons with bat wings were known for their schemes and disguises, very few knew that they were actually the greatest craftsmen in the entire Burning Legion. They had once created countless powerful and evil divine artifacts. Among them, the most famous one was the magic sword forged for the Lich King, Frostmourne. Feeling the amazing energy emitted by this small fragment on the ground, Balam immediately grabbed it in his hand and praised loudly. Thank you for your generosity and kindness. Please allow me to express my utmost respect and gratitude to you." Zhang Cheng waved his hand impatiently. "All right, you can leave now. Now, who can tell me how many angels there are on the other side of the Nether River? What trump cards do they have?" Currently, there are 50 angel legions on the other side of the river. Each legion has 10,000 people, which is almost a third of Heaven's military strength. As for their trump cards, they should all be in that stronghold. Volini gave the answer with a complicated expression. Although he had long expected that Leyland would become a monster far beyond his imagination, he never thought that this day would come so quickly. Just the soul energy emitted from the huge body of steel was enough to make all living beings tremble and feel despair. 500,000? Haha, then I'll give them a small surprise. Saying that, Zhang Cheng bent down and raised his right hand to lightly draw across the ground. In the blink of an eye, a small sand table that was exactly the same as the one on the other side of the river rose from the ground. Without another word, he raised his large hand and smashed the building on the sand table into pieces. Asterisk bang. Asterisk as the model of the stronghold was flattened. The real one also collapsed with a loud bang. The angels stationed inside were either squashed alive on the spot or flapped their wings and fled in all directions. They did not even have time to think about what was going on with this sudden disaster. It was clear that this spell that had caused many of the Burning Legion's demons to enter a state of war frenzy was actually the spell that Archimon the Defiler had used to destroy Dalaran. However, in the hands of Titan, its power was far more terrifying than the former. The light fortress, which Heaven had spent countless time and effort to build, was reduced to dust and rubble in less than a second. Pain, despair, death. With just one blow, the defense that the angels were so proud of collapsed. Admiring the souls of the angels flying in the sky after their deaths, Zhang Cheng directly ordered, "What are you waiting for? The war has already begun. Go, conquer Heaven for me. No matter what you want to do, you can do it without restraint. Slaughter, destroy, torture, vent the desires and brutality in your heart to your heart's content. The power of darkness will be invincible. Charge. Kill all those damn birdmen. The Legion is invincible for the new Titan of Darkness." Regardless of whether it was the original inhabitants of Hell who had been transformed or the Burning Legion's demons who had been resurrected, they all passed through the arch bridge like a tide and rushed towards Heaven's city amongst the clouds. They were like locusts that filled the sky. Wherever they passed, not even a blade of grass would grow. Whether it was towns, villages, or cities that seemed to have good defenses, nothing could stop their advance. The pitiful angels along the way were either tortured to death or forced to choose to fall and join the huge legion of hell, raising their butchers' knives and slaughtering their former kind. In less than a week, half of Heaven had been reduced to scorched earth. The demons did not need anything, just pure destruction and pollution. They turned a large area that was originally emitting pure energy into evil energy, turning it into a base for the huge legion's logistics. This also meant that even if Heaven repelled this attack in the future, it would not be able to return this land to its original state. Helpless, 2 archangels personally led 50 legions and blocked the path that the demons had to pass through, brutally strangling the enemy's vanguard. Hundreds of thousands of corpses that emitted a stench were densely packed on the dozens of square kilometers of land. By the time Zhang Cheng arrived with his reinforcements, the vanguard made up of low-level cannon fodder had already been completely annihilated. Many of the unlucky ones who were captured alive were even nailed to crosses, enduring the constant burning of holy energy for 20 hours. Their painful wails echoed in everyone's ears, making them feel uncomfortable all over. Chapter 945. These angels actually want to use such a childish method to slow down the advance of the army? They're simply overestimating themselves. Ren swung her barbed whip and snapped the neck of a demon nailed to the cross who was still breathing. Her tone was full of contempt and mockery. One must know that the most obvious reason why demons were called demons was that they did not have the empathic groupthink of most intelligent life forms. On the contrary, they were extremely self-centered and could even be said to be selfish. Not only did they not have the slightest bit of sadness or sympathy for the death of their own kind, but they would also do everything possible to use the death of their own kind for their own benefit. As a matter of fact, the demon army that arrived later threw the corpses of these dead demons into a huge furnace without saying a word. Then, they continuously crushed the flesh and bones and used magic and alchemy to create large war puppets that were 3 meters tall one after another. No mercy, no dignity. Neither did they have the ethics of the secular world. Every demon was a part of a huge army. Regardless of whether they were alive or dead, they would continue to strengthen the army. There is no doubt that this extremely evil and unscrupulous code of conduct was quite in line with the demon's appetite. Therefore, not only did no one object, but they also actively took the unlucky demons who were left with half their lives off the crosses and threw them into the huge furnace of flesh and blood. In a short while, hundreds of thousands of corpses were consumed and replaced by more than 60,000 freshly created undead life forms that looked like abominations. They were so ugly and disgusting, but their combat strength was abnormally strong, especially their cockroach-like physical and magical resistance. They could launch the first round of charge against the enemy's magic and provide cover for the following troops. Admiring the clumsy appearance of these big guys, Valeni stroked his chin with interest and teased, "I think those angels must be very depressed now. They would never have dreamed that these corpses that were originally left to demoralize them would provide us with tens of thousands of powerful cannon fodder that have no fear at all. How about it? Do you want to launch a wave of attacks first? Don't rush. To me, this is just a war game. The outcome is destined from the beginning. Therefore, instead of quickly defeating the enemy, it's better to spend more time enjoying the process. I'm curious if these angels created using a special method really don't know what fear and despair are like the rumors say." Zhang Cheng's eyes flashed with a mischievous light. "Oh, what do you plan to do?" The corners of Ashma's mouth curled up slightly as he asked with a half-smile. As the only native of Hell who had joined the upper echelons of the army, she was filled with undisguised malice towards her old enemy, Heaven. Just the number of young angels who had been tortured to death by her along the way numbered in the 3 digits. Every single one of them had died a tragic death. A playful expression appeared on Zhang Cheng's face, which was completely made of metal, as he replied meaningfully, "Of course it's to destroy what they cherish the most, to destroy the devout faith in their hearts. First, we have to launch an attack on the angels blocking our path, and we have to maintain the intensity to a certain extent. We have to make them feel immense pressure, but at the same time, we have to not make them despair. Secondly, let the Dreadlords infiltrate the city amongst the clouds and build a teleportation gate. Send elites to attack the most important city of heaven and take the heart of the arrogant Jehovah who claim to be the only creator. Finally, I will use evil energy to pollute it in front of all the angels and turn it into an evil divine weapon." Ha ha! Pollute the heart left behind by the Lord of Heaven? Just the sound of it was enough to fill one with anticipation. "Please count me in." Akima laughed as she made the request. The more time she spent with Zhang Cheng, the more she realized that he was a natural demon king, a monster who was so crazy that even the demons were afraid of him. "No problem." Zhang Cheng nodded without hesitation. Then, he turned to the Dreadlord and said, "Balaam, you'll be in charge of this infiltration. Is that okay? It's my honor to be of service to your great evil plan, Master." Balaam bowed deeply. Compared to not too long ago, his body was obviously much bigger, and his entire body was emitting distorted shadow energy. It was obvious that he had completely absorbed and digested the energy of the remnant fragment. He seemed to be the first lord of the new Nazresm army, and almost all the Dreadlords looked to him as their leader. Just 2 hours later, the endless demon army got into formation and launched a frenzied attack on the angel army. In less than half a day, more than 60,000 ordinary angels, 5,000 high-grade angels, and 2 archangels had died in battle. The shocking number of casualties made the 2 archangels panic, and they began to ask for reinforcements from the rear. In less than 7 hours, batch after batch of reinforcements arrived on the battlefield, injecting fresh energy into the army that had suffered heavy losses. They had no idea that thousands of Terror Demon Kings had already joined the fray in the frenzied battle just now. Some had even snuck into the city amongst the clouds unknowingly and started to conspire to build a teleportation gate for a perfect sneak attack. Heaven was not hell. It was a place full of order, and the source of all order was the Archangel Council in the city amongst the clouds, as well as the Holy Tomb, known as the Source of Light. In order to ensure that these 2 key places were not destroyed, at least half of the archangels were stationed in the city amongst the clouds all year round. The remaining 6 were scattered in various corners, in charge of ensuring that the territory of heaven was not invaded. But now, in order to deal with the frenzied attacks of the demons, 6 archangels had appeared in the army camp. In addition to those who had yet to rush back from other places, there were no more than 4 archangels in the city amongst the clouds. There was no need to ask to know that this was a perfect opportunity for a sneak attack. Balaam led the Dreadlords and silently captured nearly 2,000 newborn angels that had just been born from the Lake of Life. He then fixed them under a huge obsidian arch, raised his hands high, and loudly chanted an evil taboo incantation. In the blink of an eye, the life force of these poor, unlucky angels was continuously extracted and injected into one demonic rune after another on the arch. When the last rune was lit up, a temporary short-distance teleportation gate finally entered a stable state. The Abyssal Lords, who had long been unable to suppress the desire to kill and destroy in their hearts, were the first to charge in and began to destroy the buildings crazily, summoning a rain of fire to kill the angels that tried to rush over and destroy the teleportation gate. Following closely behind was the Doomsday Guard army, led by Pollock. They were like heavily armed infantry in the era of cold weapons, waving the great swords in their hands and crushing all trash that dared to stop the army from advancing. Chapter 946. Boom, 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 boom. Accompanied by deafening explosions and violent tremors on the ground, massive hellfire puppets descended from the sky under the summons of Arita's warlocks. In less than 10 minutes, they caused unimaginable destruction to this originally peaceful, serene, and orderly city. This was especially so for the exquisitely designed buildings, statues, and fountains that had undergone the baptism of countless years. They were simply annihilated, turning into worthless rubble and debris in the blink of an eye. Even though the angels tried their best to protect their home, the ones who launched this attack were the elites of the elites. Even the archangels with golden wings on their backs were unable to save the statue in the central square that was built to praise the supreme, true God, Jehovah. Apart from that, the Lake of Life, which was created from human souls, was also contaminated by the violent blood of the Abyssal Lords. It was a strange yellow-green color and no longer had its previous holy aura. Instead, it was filled with a twisted and evil power. Before the archangels could figure out what was happening, the large number of souls in the lake began to distort and become restless. In the end, tens of thousands of half-demon life forms crawled out of the lake. They were like mindless wild beasts, fearlessly launching surprise attacks on the angels with holy energy. Once they succeeded, they would tear open the chest and devour the beating heart and soul. What was even more terrifying was that if they devoured a certain number of souls, these monsters would undergo an unimaginable evolution, grasping all sorts of powerful spell-like abilities. If they were not careful, they would die on the spot. By the time Zhang Cheng's massive metallic body had passed through the teleportation gate, the city amongst the clouds had already become a battlefield filled with shouts of killing. He roughly scanned the surrounding situation and immediately sighed with a smile. This is the most beautiful scenery in the world. From now on, I will kill, destroy, and destroy. That's right, Great Master. This is the most beautiful scenery in the world. No matter how many times I see it, I will never get tired of it." Balaam echoed as he knelt on one knee. As a dread lord, he could feel the desperate cries of the angels. There was no longer any power that could stop the destruction of this city. "Well done. As a reward, from now on, you are the first lord of the new burning legion, Nazresm. Now, go and enjoy this feast to your heart's content." Zhang Chung stretched out a pillar-thick finger and lightly tapped Balaam's head. In an instant, the enormous amount of magic knowledge that he had never seen before flooded into Balaam's head. It took him a few minutes to digest this knowledge. He spread his wings and charged toward the nearest angel, grabbing it in his hand and injecting a wisp of evil shadow energy into it. In an instant, the angel's wings were dyed with a faint gray color. Without saying a word, he turned around and slashed his companion who was fighting alongside him. The long sword made of the rare, magic metal of heaven pierced through his chest, and holy silver blood gushed out from the wound. Even at the very last moment before his death, this pitiful and unlucky fellow still didn't understand why his best friend wanted to kill him. After killing the first of his kind, his angel wings were completely dyed black under the influence of the mysterious power. There was no need to ask to know that he had completely fallen. Hee. Interesting. Was this a powerful spell that could directly affect one's soul? It was as if he was made for Nazresm. Testing. I need to do more tests. Balaam grinned and turned into a black shadow. He began his cruel magic experiment. Under his control, the number of fallen angels on the battlefield increased. In the end, the first army completely composed of fallen angels was born in the northwest. Zhangqing naturally wasn't interested in such small matters. He strode his huge body to the tall building named Holy Tomb. According to the records of hell, this was the tomb where the former Lord of Heaven was buried. He was regarded by humans as the only true God in the universe, Jehovah. Of course, the so-called only true God in the universe was treated as a joke. Any god who dared to give himself such a title was either an idiot who was extremely delusional or a liar who bragged about himself. Obviously, this scheming god didn't look like an idiot, so he could naturally be classified as the latter. His most powerful point was that he was able to exert the power of faith to the extreme. He had completely transformed the entire world into his own kingdom. Any energy that didn't match his own strength would be expelled. It could be said that the entire heaven was equivalent to God himself. Normally, it would be quite difficult to kill such a powerful god. But as the saying went, cleverness would always be misled by cleverness. No matter how clever a liar was, they often didn't end well in the end. In order to make Earth a part of his kingdom, Jehovah personally descended in ancient times and tried to show off. He wanted to harvest the faith of ordinary humans who were still in the primitive and ignorant era. But as the saying went, don't show off, or you'll be struck by lightning. His actions angered the Olympian gods who were at their peak at that time. Zeus, the god-king who controlled the power of thunder and lightning, led his brothers, sisters, sons, and daughters to swarm up and beat this poor god until he couldn't take care of himself. Then, he was attacked by the ancient Egyptian gods. Only his heart was left, which was snatched back by the archangels. Later, the archangels who took over the power took advantage of the ancient gods on Earth being in a deep sleep to personally direct and create the biggest scam in the history of human civilization. That was the story of the so-called resurrection of Jesus, the Son of God. They successfully achieved the wish that their masters longed for, but couldn't. It had to be said that this was a huge irony, a black humor that made everyone who knew about it laugh out loud. Standing on the stairs, Zhang Cheng silently watched the three archangels who were waving long swords burning with golden holy flame, and Rin, Polak, and Ekima who were fighting with them. He asked casually, "Do any of you need help?" "No, thank you. I really enjoy this feeling." Ekima was the first to reject without hesitation. The male archangel who was fighting with her had his hair, eyebrows, and beard burned to ashes by the green, evil fire. He looked like a mess. Rin, the succubus queen, raised her hand and shot out a powerful shadow arrow. She licked her seductive red lips and said, "Sorry, master. I don't think you need to deal with this kind of trash yourself. It's over. Idiots who dare to go against the army will all die." As soon as he finished speaking, Polak raised his hoof-like right foot and stomped on the ground, causing it to shake violently. Then he raised his sword and chopped off his opponent's head on the spot. Then he spread his wings and covered himself. The archangel who had lost his head suddenly had golden patterns on the surface of his body. Finally, he exploded with a boom and formed a terrifying holy energy storm. Even a demon like Akima couldn't avoid being severely burned. Large areas of her skin appeared with pustules and blisters. Chapter 9:47. After the shockingly powerful energy storm, Polak retracted the wings he used to protect himself. He grabbed his opponent's head and roared loudly, "Fall or die. Choose. No one can stop the advance of the army. No, you should be the one to go. Despicable demon." Another female archangel raised her weapon angrily and rushed forward at lightning speed. With a bang, she sent Polak flying. Even though she looked no different from a human, the level of energy contained in her body was close to that of some of the weaker gods. Fortunately, Polak was no pushover. He quickly stabilized his body, raised his green sword burning with evil flames, and fought with his opponent. Looking at this extremely boring fight, Zhang Cheng sighed slightly. He directly smashed the holy tomb, which was protected by a powerful magic seal, with a punch, and fished out an exquisite coffin made of an unknown metal. Just as he was about to open the lid and take out the heart inside to end this farce, a male angel in golden armor suddenly descended from the sky. Unlike the other archangels, the energy contained in this guy's body was extremely shocking. It was almost 10 times the energy of all the archangels present combined. Every step he took would cause the entire world of heaven to shake. Looking at this powerful enemy that suddenly appeared, Zhang Cheng asked with great interest, "You're Michael, aren't you? The legendary deputy of heaven, the Lord of Light, and also the only archangel who luckily survived the ancient war?" "That's right. Michael is the name given to me by the human believers. I prefer to be called by another name." Michael, the current supreme leader of heaven's forces, replied politely. He seemed to not care at all about the demon army that was destroying and slaughtering the city without restraint. His 2 eyes were fixed on the metal tube. "Nice to meet you, my dear Michael. If you don't mind, can you give me a few seconds to take out the thing inside?" Zhang Cheng asked as he poked the metal coffin lightly with his finger. As a person with extremely sharp senses, he could guarantee that as long as he had the slightest intention of opening the coffin, the other party would immediately take the opportunity to launch a barrage of attacks. Of course, if his main body had descended, Zhang Cheng would not have cared about a mere archangel who had survived the ancient era. But the problem was, he was not here in his true form. It was just a projection of his consciousness, and the power he could summon was just the dark energy he used to activate the massive metal body. According to his current strength, he could at most use his full strength once. After that, this body would become a useless piece of scrap metal due to the exhaustion of energy. Magar undoubtedly felt this as well. He smiled and shook his head. "I'm sorry. I'm afraid I can't allow you to do that. Although Jehovah's reign as the supreme master of heaven is a thing of the past, his remains are still very important to me. Also, I'm very curious. Who exactly are you? How did he manage to unify hell in such a short time? If I tell you the answer, are you willing to embrace the darkness and become the commander of my fallen angel army?" A faint light flashed in Zhang Cheng's eyes as he began to quickly gather energy to launch a fatal blow. "Ha ha! You just said that I'm the deputy of heaven, the Lord of Light. The essence of my power alone determines that I can't betray heaven. So please don't waste your breath. Let's use our power to decide the fate of heaven and hell." With that, a dazzling light burst out from Agar's body as he walked forward slowly with elegant steps. Tens of thousands of years had given him some power and combat skills that mortals could not imagine. So he was confident that he could kill this seemingly powerful enemy in front of him, just like those great demons who had tried to invade heaven and were killed over the past few thousand years. "I like your confidence. but I'm afraid you'll never understand how huge the gap between us is. Even if you destroy this body now, it's not a big deal to me. But if you fail, heaven will perish. Someone once said that the reason why the strong are strong is that even if they fail, they will have another chance. But if the weak fails, it's equivalent to a disaster. Now, let me see the standard of you, the deputy of heaven. As soon as he finished speaking, Zhang Cheng's body was like a stream of light, crossing space and distance at an unbelievable speed and fiercely collided with his opponent. Because his whole body was made of magic metal that was strong and had excellent magic resistance, his weight was very terrifying. So just by the inertia of the initial kinetic energy, he could squash and crush most living creatures alive. Bang! After a loud bang, Magar's body turned into light balls that filled the sky, and in a short while, he was reassembled. Obviously, this kind of pure physical attack was nothing to him. Particle transformation? Should I say, as expected of the Lord of Light. Zhang Qing pushed away a collapsed wall and slowly stood up from the ruins, an interested expression appearing on his face. Thank you for your compliment. In fact, I was born from the first ray of light. So in heaven, I'm the light, and the light is me. There's no power that can kill me. Magar replied meaningfully. Sounds like it's not easy to deal with. But it's okay. I like a challenge that's a little difficult. With that, Zhang Cheng raised his head and looked at the sun hanging in the sky. To be precise, it was a burning energy ball created with divine power and faith. Magar's face changed drastically, and he asked sternly, "What are you trying to do?" "What am I trying to do?" "Of course, I'm going to destroy the Son of Heaven and make you, the Lord of Light, lose your greatest reliance." Zhang Cheng sneered and raised his right hand, using half of the energy in his body to condense a high-pressure demonic fireball, and threw out. Whoosh! Under the effect of the huge force, the fireball directly drew a straight line in the sky and accurately hit the target. The next second, boom! The stable space at the top of heaven was torn apart by the terrifying energy explosion, revealing a large passage to the distorted void. Many angels who were flying in the sky with their wings were sucked in on the spot and disappeared without a trace before they could even scream. No one knew where they went, and no one knew whether they were dead or alive. In contrast, Magar's condition was not much better, and he was spitting out mouthfuls of golden holy blood. Needless to say, the damage caused by that blow was far more fatal than imagined. Chapter 948. Cough, cough, cough. Lord Magar, you're injured. Filthy demon, how dare you hurt the symbol of light and justice? As the former deputy king of heaven and the current supreme ruler, Magar's position in the eyes of the archangel was equivalent to Yahweh's position in his eyes. After all, in ancient times, most of the older generation of angels had died. The angels in heaven were the new generation that was born from the lake of life. Although they had heard a lot of history and stories about the past, they had not seen with their own eyes how incredible the power of Yahweh, who created heaven from nothing, was. However, they had seen Magar kill the demons of hell again and again, leading heaven to victory one after another. Therefore, in the eyes of the angels, he was the symbol of invincibility, the last hope and pillar of heaven. If even he failed, it meant that heaven would usher in the final judgment. Because of the loss of the sun, the entire heaven suddenly fell into darkness. Only the traces of starlight in the distorted void, or some other luminous object, barely provided a little light. Magar covered his mouth and nose that kept bleeding and suppressed the rage in his heart. He asked loudly, "How do you know the close connection between the sun and me?" "No, I actually don't know anything. I'm just trying my luck. After all, according to normal logic, since you're the incarnation of light, the first thing I have to do is to destroy the light source. And the Son of Heaven happens to be the biggest light source. It's simple and easy to understand, isn't it?" Zhang Cheng touched his chin and replied with a smile. At this moment, he finally understood why the Dark Titan was not worried at all, even though the Burning Legion had failed again and again when they invaded Azeroth. Because for Sargeras, there was no opponent on planet Azeroth who could match him. No matter if he failed once, twice, thrice, or 4 times, he could always start again from the beginning. As the attacker, no matter how many times he failed, as long as he succeeded once, it meant that he had won the final victory. But for the Azeroth Alliance, who was in a defensive state, no matter how many times they won, as long as they failed once, it meant that they had lost everything. By the same logic, when launching a full-scale invasion of heaven, Zhang Cheng, who is only a projection of his consciousness, failed once or twice, so it was nothing. However, as long as Michael failed once, he would lose the opportunity to make a comeback. But regrettably, Mikkel did not seem to understand that. He pushed away the young angel who was supporting him and raised his sword that was entirely made of high-energy photons. "I admit that I was careless just now," he said coldly. "But your luck ends here. You might be the smartest and most treacherous demon in hell in the last few thousand years, but in the end, you will still die under my sword." Haha, naive. It seems that in the thousands of years since Jehovah's death, you haven't made any progress at all. You don't understand the power that keeps the entire heaven running. You're too obsessed with your little tricks as the Lord of Light, so you've neglected to study souls and faith. Otherwise, you wouldn't have said such ignorant words. Forget it. What's the use of saying so much nonsense to a dying man? Let me send you on your way. As he spoke, Zhang Cheng tore off one of his arms and used the power of alchemy to reshape it into the shape of a war hammer before infusing it with dark energy. In an instant, the huge hammer suddenly ignited with a scorching green flame, and at the same time, it let out a ghostly wail as it continuously devoured the souls of the fallen angels and demons around it. There was no doubt that this was not an ordinary weapon or magical weapon, but an evil weapon that would inject the pain of tens of thousands of souls into the deepest part of the enemy's body. Mikkel saw this scene, and his golden pupils suddenly shrank. His eyes were full of vigilance, and after a moment of hesitation, he turned into a ball of light and rushed out. Commendable courage. Have a taste of the hammer of pain. Zhang Cheng sneered as he swung the war hammer at the ball of light. The next second, asterisk boom, asterisk, accompanied by an extremely painful scream, Mikkel was smashed back into his human form. He knelt on one knee and clutched his chest, his expression twisted to the extreme. He could not believe that with just one touch, his steel-like will had collapsed. Pain, despair, death, the opposite of heaven, kept echoing in his mind. Ouch, what a poor little thing. Great evil master, if you don't mind, can you spare his life? I think after a period of training, this guy should be able to become one of us. Rin, who had successfully defeated her opponent, wagged her tail, her tone full of sarcasm. "No, you're wrong. He can't fall. Because once he falls, it means death. I don't mean physical death, but the death of his soul. As a life born from a ray of light, the light is his soul, his core, and his faith. Once the light disappears, his personality will also disappear, and in its place will be a completely different life. Understand?" Zhang Cheng corrected with the heavy war hammer in his hand. Although it sounded unbelievable, it was an ironclad fact. Jehovah used the first ray of light after the fusion of heaven to create the first angel, Mikkel, and used him as a blueprint to create several archangels and ordered them to assist him in governing thousands of angels. However, this design had a fatal flaw, and that was once the sun in the sky, condensed by divine power and faith, was destroyed, the Lord of Light would lose the source of his power and become a self-burning candle. As soon as the energy stored in his body was exhausted, he would disappear from the world as if he had never existed, and not even a corpse would be left. Go to hell, devil. I'm the eternal guardian of heaven. No one can destroy it. Under the influence of strong anger, fear, and despair, Mikkel rushed forward and waved the light sword in his hand like a madman. Every time he collided with the hammer of pain, the expression on his face would become more ferocious, and the wings that were emitting golden light became fainter and fainter due to the rapid loss of energy. In the end, when the energy was about to be exhausted, he chose to burn his soul, and with a thunderous force, cut the huge metal body in half, and disappeared from the world forever. Feeling the sorrowful light spots in the air, Zhang Cheng could not help but praise with a smile. Well done. My dear Magar, you've made this boring war much more interesting.